Thank you for pressing start on episode 67 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today, we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Inscryption. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Po, but it's not only me. There's a guy with a flow who's on a journey. So won't you put your hands together, please, for the Zeo Drifter, the indie game sifter, the curse-cracking mister, DiscoCola. What is going on?
I love being the curse-cracking mister. I love that. You know what? I'm glad to be back, but it's been a while since I've played this game here, Popo. I might need a reminder. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. My ant-spawning, battery-bearing, bomb-latching, bone-digging, corpse-eating, dam-building, gem-guarding, mighty-leaping, nano-arming, orange-moxing, rabbit-holing, steel-trapping, trifurcated, striking, trinket-bearing, Lucky Carter?
Oof, if only I had all of those. That sounds like a badass card.
You'd only need one card, I think. Those are references to our featured game, Inscryption, which both of us have been playing very recently. It's our first featured game of season 7 of our show. It's at the point where I have to think about what number it is.
Yeah.
Like season 6? Oh, no, 7.
I think around season 5, I was starting to lose track of like when we played that game. That was season 3.
Oh,
was
yeah.
it season 4? And now it's just gone.
That'll be
It's
tough.
all gone.
I vividly remember seasons 1, 2, 3, and maybe even like 4. Like if you gave me a game from one of those seasons, I could tell you, especially if it's a featured game, which season it was in. But then
I could at that point, but now
5
I've
and
lost
6,
it.
I'm like, yeah, there's a lot, but that's just a testament to how much we've done, I think, which is really fun and impressive. I'm proud of us.
We're doing great.
We're doing awesome.
Yeah,
and
I love us.
And we're doing more and more cool things every
yeah.
season, which I'd like to talk about what's coming up this season. But first, let's talk about what Underplayed is for new listeners or maybe listeners who haven't caught us in a while.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Underplayed is an indie video game podcast. Each episode, we come to the recording, each having played our feature game, that is the headlining game. So, for example, this episode's headlining game is Inscryption.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, we both have played a different indie game in secret. Bopo doesn't know what I played. I don't know what he played. And then we come to the recording and we review those first. So you're going to hear an indie game review from me, and then you're going to hear an indie game review from Bopo, and then you're going to hear our joint review of Inscryption.
Yes, I'm so excited to review 30 more games this season.
That's what we get in a full season is 30 heckin' games.
Yes, and it's cool because it's a good split between games we're individually playing and then games we're both playing and talking about together with those featured games. And usually the featured games are those more recognizable indies, and the secret games are a little bit more under the radar. And I like that we are kind of able to cover the full spectrum of popularity when it comes to indie games, because indie games are a very popular part of video games, but still not enough people play them.
Yeah, and I'll come to the recording usually with a similar game, so you get like a little taste of compare and contrast, and then Bopo will come with something totally different sometimes. And so
I'm the wild card sometimes.
You get a lot of different types of games, but you also get a lot of similar types of games, so good times.
Yes, and I know not everybody listens to our previous season finale where we decide on all the featured games for the upcoming season, so let's do that here. Let's talk about the 10 featured games we're going to play this season, just real quick. First today, we're reviewing Inscryption, and then just going in order. Our featured games are Katana Zero, Fez, One Shot World Machine Edition, Untitled Goose Game, Papers, Please, Another Crab's Treasure, Her Story, Animal Well, and Octodad Dadliest Catch, which is our co-op game for this season. We're going to actually stream and play that one together, and you can catch us playing that together, hopefully, somewhat soon.
Yeah, around the time this episode comes out, maybe a couple weeks after.
Yeah, maybe. But that'll be at twitch.tv/underplayed podcast. And DiscoCola, we have 3 lovely guests joining us this season for some of these episodes.
Yeah, it's the season of the dev, so
Yeah.
we've got some great guests coming up.
We've graduated from Day of the Devs to Podcast of the Devs. No, but yeah, we have 3 awesome devs. We'll be interviewing these developers, and we'll also be reviewing a game alongside them. And it's a game that they've picked from our list, which is really cool. So the 3 developers we are going to have as guests this season are Noah Lone, aka Some Humble Onion, who will be our guest next episode for the Katana Zero episode. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a great time. Then 3 episodes later, for our Untitled Goose Game episode, that is the game picked by Oscar Losada Suarez from Triband. And then our second to last featured game, Animal Well, that was picked by Jeremy from Moon Soul Games.
Yes, so you're looking at episodes 68, 71, and 75 this season.
So if you're looking to get some insight into the world of indie game development, we are planning to ask these developers some questions about what got them to where they are, what they're working on, what they're looking forward to doing next, all these things. And also, I'd like to say that this is a great jumping on point for new listeners. So you might be listening to this and you might be thinking, whoa, this is episode 67. This is like a new season. Do I need to have listened to any other episodes? Absolutely not. You can listen to our show starting anywhere, and we welcome you wherever you join us.
Yeah. We try to keep references to a relative. We reference a lot of other games just in general, but that's about the extent of it.
One thing we do at the start of a season, DiscoCola, is we talk about what we did in our break since the last season. And I think we both got up to quite a lot because we've got a lot of time in between seasons.
Yeah, and we switched to a bi-weekly release date, which reduces a little bit of the crunch in between seasons.
Yes, that's another noteworthy announcement about this season is that if you're listening along with us as we're releasing episodes, it'll be 2 weeks between new episodes. That'll help us stretch things out. You won't feel overwhelmed with listening to new episodes week by week and feeling like you're falling behind. Thank you for pointing that out as well.
And you also won't be missing us for like 2.5, 3 months.
Yes.
While we're in between.
We'll only be gone
releases.
for like a month maybe in between seasons, which is super helpful. It'll just make things more consistent. So thank you for that. Let's go to what we've done between seasons now. Do we want to just go back and forth talking about like one thing at a time?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
I don't know which one of us will run out first, but well, here, let's start with a collective one.
Yeah.
We both finished Sea of Stars. We
Yes.
both went for that platinum. I was pretty close when we recorded our season finale, but I was still missing, I think, those boss battles with the ring of make stuff weird attachment.
Ring of make stuff weird. Yes. I think that is verbatim what it's called.
That is what it's called.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would not be able to tell you what it's called, but I know what you're talking about.
We
Yeah.
both did that and have since gotten the platinum. And I watched a stream of theirs about some of the upcoming DLC. It might already be live when this episode comes out. It just updates with some co-op stuff and changes like some of the grapploo mechanics in co-op. And there's some other small like quality of life changes that really, I think, up the quality of the game and address some of the complaints that Bopo had in that episode.
Yeah, this is just a net positive for the game. This is actually releasing at the end of 2024. As we sit down, it's just like a week away, Disco.
Okay.
But there are actually 2 noteworthy DLC
Yes, there's
releases.
another even bigger DLC coming up.
Right. So I want to just address that the first one is called Dawn of Equinox. That's the one Disco just described. And then there's another one that's more substantial, featuring new playable classes, characters, areas, music, enemies, bosses, and puzzles. That's called Throes of the Watchmaker. There's going to be juggling in it.
I know. You're so stoked.
Excited. I'm so stoked for that.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. And that's going to be released in spring 2025. I don't think there's a date on that right now as we're recording, but that'll happen actually after this episode comes out. So, thankfully we won't be announcing something that will have released by then.
Juggling figure in wheels.
Oh my God. It'd probably be one of the worst figurines. Just throwing juggling balls at the wall.
Yeah.
That's not going to bring it down. You have to throw like torches at it. But yeah, we both got the platinum in that game. So in honor of both of us getting the platinum in Sea of Stars, I just want to play a little celebratory little thing here. Let's just
I wonder what this is. Well, that
oh,
was
that
anticlimactic.
was pretty bad.
Yeah.
If I say
Whimper.
so. Oh, there we go.
Yay!
We got to play it again though.
That's that glitz.
There
Yes.
we go.
Glitz and glamour,
Glitz.
baby.
Yes, good job to us. Well, that's good. I'm glad you remembered to talk about that. I want to talk about two things at once here.
Okay.
Because they have something to do with each other. So sorry for taking extra time. But I played 2 past Jealous games.
Oh, I knew this actually. Yes,
Yes.
I knew about one of them. I maybe don't know about the other one.
I think you know about both. Well, I don't know, but this is going back to seasons 2 and 3.
Okay.
Okay. My Jealous game from season 2 was Creature in the Well.
Oh, that's the one I forgot. Yes.
And I played and streamed this and I had a great time. I had one of the funniest streams in terms of like conversations from the chat during this game for some reason.
Okay.
And then I played Mutazione, my Jealous game from season 3, also on stream. And that was a noteworthy pick too, because one of our upcoming guests, Oscar Losada Suarez, worked on that game.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get that under my belt so that I knew about it while we're talking to him. But I just wanted to say that Creature in the Well is fun. It's a fun idea, and I love the world. I love like how it looks and everything. I found this game to be hard. I found this game to be like harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, those like exploding guys are rough.
The EMPs,
yeah,
I think single-handedly keep this game from being great in my mind. I think it's good. I think it's really solid. And just stepping back for context, this is a third-person action game that's kind of like pinball. You're a machine in the desert with a melee weapon of some kind.
Yes.
Yes, you have 2 melee weapons, and you basically play pinball in these rooms, and you make your way through this facility, unlocking doors. You have to hit lots of switches. You have to do sequences of hitting things. And there are obstacles. There are exploding things. There are things that hurt you. And I thought this world, again, was just really interesting to explore. I liked finding all the secrets. I liked doing the cleanup of this game. And if I were to score it, I'd probably give it like a 7. Like it was solid. I liked it.
I think that's probably what I would have expected from you.
Yeah. Now on to Mutazione. This is a kind of a soap opera game where you play as a girl who's visiting this village because her grandfather is dying, and she's visiting him and also learning about all of these villagers. There's a ton of lore and backstory to every character, and you sort of just explore this village and get to know these people. And it's a very strange world that also feels like very grounded.
Yeah.
And this is, again, a game I streamed, and I had such a great time. I was so immersed in this world. I loved almost every character. I think that's kind of the same sentiment you had when you reviewed it. You really just like loved all the characters. And so I was ready to love them too. And I did. And I think this game is excellent storytelling. It is one of my favorite narrative-focused indie games now, and I'd probably give this a 9 or a 9.5
I think that's even higher than I rated it.
Yeah, you might have given it like an 8.5. I loved Mutazione.
Yeah, a lot of it fits your sensibilities a little bit more because you really get into those like narrative-focused games, whereas like sometimes I just need stuff to be moving a little bit faster.
And that's fair. This game is kind of slow. And if you want to see everything in this game, you have to walk around to places repeatedly.
Bunch of times.
And you're that kind of gamer where you want to see everything. I'm that way too. And so there were times where I felt the tedium of walking around in Mutazione, but I still loved getting invested in these characters. There were surprises. I thought certain characters would act a certain way based on like cliches and what I've seen in other stories. And they often surprised me. They often did something more subdued or admirable than I expected. And I loved that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single character in that game that is particularly one-dimensional. Even, like, Grubba, he's got more to him than just this salty a-hole. There's, like, a weird empathy to them that, you wouldn't expect from someone so straightforward and cold.
Yes, absolutely. I was just bowled over by the cast, and they're just speaking with text boxes, and it's just written so well. So the strength of the storytelling lies in this writing, and how these characters emote too is very expressive. There are some gardening gameplay aspects to this game too. You're restoring these areas where people can garden, and that was interesting too. That added a layer behind what they were talking about and exploring as well. And again, future guest Oscar, he worked on lots of aspects in this game. It was
Mhm.
cool to see his name in the credits, like
Like,
all over the
9
credits.
or 10 times, yeah.
Yes. So he actually got involved with the development of this game really far into its development cycle. We're going to ask him about that. And I think that's interesting that he was just so involved in so many parts of this game late in its development.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the two jealous games I played. I still have to play Dark. I also have to play Curse Crackers, For Whom the Bell Toils. That's
Ooh,
another one.
You're gonna love Curse Crackers, for sure.
I actually should be able to play that before this season premieres. I
Okay.
should be able to. We record this super early. I'm going to do that before.
Don't rush. I've only
Right.
played like 2, maybe 3 of my jealous games ever, so it's
Yeah.
all good.
I want to catch up on them because I'm jealous.
Yeah.
What's something else you did?
Okay, so I played a game called Elsie, and this is sort of a roguelite, Mega Man-like kind of game. It's something that I've been looking forward to. I haven't, like, been at the edge of my seat like I was with Unsighted.
Yeah.
But I've been looking forward to it because I think the boss designs look really cool. And it looked like the controls were really good, and the controls were really good when I did get it in hand. It feels really good to play. I won't get too deep into it because I still am reserving the right to have this as a secret game someday, but this is just something that I wanted to play. I picked it up on release day and had a good time. I did reach the ending, but there's
Nice.
still a lot more to do as far as like completion goes. But yeah, it wasn't bad for a roguelike Mega Man. And most of the time, I find roguelike and Mega Man like to be not opposed. Like the two can exist, but the reason that I love Mega Man's is diametrically opposed to the
Right.
concept of a roguelike. So
Your love only falls on one side of the scale.
yeah.
Just to compare it to
reference
Inscryption.
yeah. But yeah, ultimately I had a good time. And I have since tried 20XX since you and I both last talked about it. And I mean, I have to give it credit where credit's due. The controls do feel really good. And I did have some fun playing it. But a part of me that loves Mega Man and the concept of a roguelike still just.
Is 20XX a roguelike?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Is,
I thought it was like just a straight action platformer. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was like super not on board with it.
You had tried that previously, or
I think
never?
I tried that back in maybe season 6, early season 6.
Okay.
I just didn't bring it up ever. But
Nice.
I have turned it on and played it now.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, any further review depth will be saved for an episode of Underplayed.
I'm glad you're reserving the right to review that as a secret game because it just seems like one that is down your alley. Another thing I was able to do was play a co-op game called We Were Here Expeditions: The Friendship. I played with our friend Emily, aka A Specific Egg. This is a game that she got in a Humble Bundle, and I was going to get the Humble Bundle as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was curious because I knew it was on PlayStation 5, and I like trophies on PlayStation. So I looked up whether there's crossplay, and there was.
Ooh.
And it was on sale at that time. So I ditched the Humble Bundle, and I got it on PS5. We played through this. If you don't know the We Were Here series, there are 5 of them now. Expeditions: The Friendship is the newest one. And the idea is that you are kind of stranded in this like abandoned carnival space, and you get split up, and you only see what your character sees. You don't see what your co-op partner sees.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking to each other. We have puzzles. We each only get half of the puzzle. And there are 3 main sections of the game. And we're sort of guiding each other, helping each other out, describing what we're seeing, and trying to solve all these puzzles cooperatively. And this game is short and sweet in like the best way. It only takes, I would say, probably like 2.5 to 3 hours to play, so you can do it in one sitting. It depends on like how good you are at puzzles, maybe which puzzles you get versus your co-op partner. Some people are just going to naturally be better at some things, but the middle section, the second of the 3 major parts of this game, it was fascinating because we were each seeing half the puzzle and we're on opposite sides of a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments where there are like these holes in the wall and we're picking things up. And for a moment, I can see what's on her side and she can see what's on my side, but it's like far. And she's like, whoa, that's what you see. And I'm like, whoa, that's what you see. And so we're trying to like figure this stuff out together. And it's so much fun. And I also wanted to mention this because very soon we're going to start streaming this series from the top of the series. We're going to start streaming We Were Here, followed by We Were Here 2 on Twitch. I think like for us, the friendship was like a test to see like, are we going to like this series? We both super dug it. And I recommend it to people who want to do more co-op stuff.
Cool. Well, as coincidence has it, I recently collaborated with the other half of No Small Games. Cater Blossom and I took a different route. We didn't play a game together, but we co-wrote an article at nosmallgames.com about indie video game music soundtracks. We both really focus on the music in the games. I'm still hosting the show that you actually started. Listeners might not know that, but you started Press Start to Listen back in
my college days.
2011, 10, maybe 12, who knows.
I actually don't know. But you're close, I think. Yeah.
So I picked that up after you graduated, because you ended up graduating before I did, and brought it here over to KZUM. And so we just picked 5 indie game soundtracks that we felt were worthy of talking about. And then because we both share a lot of tastes, we collectively picked a couple that were not taking up our top 5 spots, but were also like, givens to mention. One of them is Sayonara Wild Hearts. Shocker.
Yeah,
but
that'd be in my list for sure.
So it's on the internet, so it'll be there indefinitely. Check it out at nosmallgames.com.
Yeah, we can also maybe put it in the show notes for this episode.
Sure.
If I remember to do that.
Yeah.
Editing Bo, please make a note now while you're listening to this to do that. Another thing I got to play was Astrobot. This is a big AAA game.
Oh, yeah. You've been looking forward to this.
I've been looking forward to this for months since they announced it. Like, I think it was early summer, so it hasn't even been known that long.
You've been like an evangelist about that. You like you'd be like, you should play this, Disco. I'm like, yes, I know.
Yeah.
I will.
Astrobot, the series, has several games now. There was a VR game on PlayStation VR called Astrobot Rescue Mission. Then there's Astro's Playroom, which comes with the PS5. I think that's what you should play. Short and sweet game. And then Astrobot is the first sort of full-fledged non-VR Astrobot 3D platforming game. And I love that they just went back to basics and just called it Astrobot. They're like putting a flag in the ground saying like, this is like a new start.
This is what it is.
This is Astrobot. And this game is just joyful and polished and some of the most beautiful platforming I've ever done.
It looks like enjoyable 3D platforming. I do want to play it really bad.
It is so good. There are no skips when it comes to all the levels. The music is great. The collection is great. You collect other Astrobots. The boss fights are fun. There are delightful Easter eggs and surprises and moments if you have knowledge about PlayStation history. There are some obscure characters in this game. I had to Google what some of the characters were, and I'm just floored by all of the ideas from PlayStation history, like both way past and more recent, that they chose to include here.
I saw a couple. I was like, I can't believe they included that guy.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Stuff that you'd think like, oh, I'm probably part of like 1% of PlayStation players who knows even what this character, what game this character's from. And maybe you haven't even played the game. You just kind of know by happenstance somehow. And so there are hundreds of these bots that you rescue on paper and just also in practice. It's perfect. I can't think of any flaws with it. It's just, I might want to play it every year or every 2 years. It's so good. I can't wait to see more Astrobot.
I've got to pull it up in your backlog list to see where it is. I'm sure it's pretty freaking high.
I haven't updated my backlogged list, but it's in my top 100. I think it's now in my top 20. I just have to update that list.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, I've got we've been on this for a bit. I've got 3 more. How many more do you have?
I have 4 more. One's pretty quick and one involves you.
Okay. I'll go with this one. I started Neva last week, I think.
Nice.
I played Greece with my wife. I think the second time I ever played through it.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe I played it with her the first time I played through it. Anyways, we're playing it together now. We've only done the one play session so far. We only have weekends, and the last few weekends we've been pretty tired after the kids go to bed.
That's fair, yeah.
But I'm looking forward to hopefully going through the rest of this with her. It's got a really high completion rate on PlayStation, so that's promising.
Good.
But also, there's like combat in this game, and I wasn't necessarily expecting that, at least to the extent we've already experienced. So I don't know if my wife's going to hang on for the full ride.
Okay, so you're passing the controller?
Yeah, yep.
She plays a little, you play a little? Okay.
We're taking like, there's pretty big like cutscene sort of checkpoints. It's like pretty obvious that you're at like a checkpoint, so we switch back and forth there.
I love that. I love that, though. I hope you're able to continue doing it despite the combat, and report back, please.
I would love to.
This is on my list to play in the next few months, too. I'm planning on playing it on stream very soon.
Oh, good.
So I'm looking forward to comparing notes, too. We're both big fans of Greece. We haven't reviewed it yet on the show, but...
Oh, have we not? Oh, darn.
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah.
They're both on the list now because I saw that you put Neva on there and I approved it. So.
Yeah. We'll get to that. Another thing I want to shout out, I don't think you had any idea I did this, and I would be shocked. I would bet you so much money that you've never heard of this game.
Okay.
I played a social deduction game.
Social deduction
Yeah,
game.
like an Among Us sort of game.
Okay.
Where you're in an online environment. It's somewhat cooperative, but then there's someone who's bad.
You did? Okay.
I did. I never play these games.
I know.
I've actually never even played Among Us.
I know.
So this is me saying it wasn't Among Us. Tell me you've never played Among Us without saying you've never played Among Us. No. So I have a Twitch friend named Hype Monk. And Hype Monk invited me to a social deduction night with some of his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Those friends were Potato Foxy, Forky.png, and the Indie Maniac. And the 5 of us played a game called Dale and Dawson Stationary Supplies. Have you ever heard of Dale and Dawson Stationary Supplies?
No, I haven't.
I think you should look this up on Steam.
Okay.
This is a game where you're in a 3D space, you're in an office, and most of the people playing are either workers or the boss or an assistant to the boss, or like a, not a vice boss. What am I trying to say? Assistant manager?
Yeah. Assistant to the regional manager.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a funny reference because this actually is a lot like The Office, the show. Like it feels like The Office, the show, in terms of the environment and just like how dull things are. But then there's one person who is assigned the role of a slacker. And the slacker is trying to undo a lot of the work that people are doing in this stationary supply office. They are deactivating the servers. They're putting people's staplers in Jell-O. They're using the bathroom too much. They're drinking on the job. They're setting the trash on fire.
So,
They're doing stuff like that.
This sounds familiar. I don't know if I heard you talk about it on a stream or something, but
this
part of it,
yes,
I am familiar with.
Yes. And going into this night, I was a little nervous for a few reasons. One, I didn't know these people. I totally trusted Hype Monk. He's a great guy, but I didn't know these people. And just anytime I'm in a situation where I'm outnumbered by people I don't know, and especially when I can't see them and I'm talking to them.
Outnumber their adversaries.
Well, at a certain point, I was the slacker twice, actually. So I did feel like I had to really be careful. Another reason I was a little nervous is because I had never played, a social deduction game really, which is amazing to me that I can't think of a single time I've ever tried one. But I was assigned the slacker twice throughout this night, and I think an accidental advantage I had is a lot of these people didn't know my sarcasm, my
Mhm.
my usual tone, the way I conduct myself usually. So I was able to sort of be a little more mysterious and sort of be in the background, and I evaded suspicion both times, and I won.
Heckers.
So I was very lucky, but also I feel like I was good at just sort of evading people, and that's what worked in my favor. So there comes a point where everybody has to vote, or the boss has to fire someone because they think you're the slacker. And there's a moment where everyone can sort of argue and call each other out and say, "Oh, I noticed you do this. Oh, no, that I did that because of this." And that's the part that worried me. But I never got suspected. And so I made it through. And of course, when you're the slacker once and then you're assigned the slacker the next game, who's going to think that you're the slacker
Yeah.
again, right? So that's
Yeah.
another advantage I had. So
With
yeah.
Among Us, you can always just be like, if you're never sure, it's always red. Red is
Right.
always the guy.
I know. It's kind of like how red cars have higher insurance rates because red cars tend to get in more accidents.
Yeah.
It's like that
Yeah.
sort of thing. But here you can customize your character. You can choose what suit to wear and what your hairstyle looks like. So that was kind of fun. We figured that out after a while. But again, the game is called Dale and Dawson Stationery Supplies. And I think it's sold quite well on Steam. I think it's been a decently popular multiplayer game over
Yeah,
the
looks
summer.
like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it was fun. It was fun.
Awesome. My next one I want to talk about is a game called Dicey Dungeons.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah.
I've heard of this.
I've
Yeah.
had this on my shelf for a little while. I got the Super Rare Games release. Right? Super Rare Games, I believe. Anyways, I've been looking forward to having a game to synergize it with. And I was going to synergize it with today's featured game.
Whoa.
But what I didn't realize at the time is that Dicey Dungeons is huge.
Oh, okay.
Like, I knew it was like a roguelike, and I've gotten to the end of dungeons and beaten the end of dungeons before,
Yeah.
but you have to do it 42 times
Oh,
with
what?
6 different characters on increasing levels of difficulty in order to, reach credits.
I just looked it up on how long to beat. To finish it,
Yeah.
26 to 27 hours on average?
Yeah.
That's wild.
So
54 hours to obtain 100% completion.
I abandoned it for
Yeah.
a secret game, but nevertheless, I did have a lot of fun. I think you would like it too, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'll ever play it for a secret game just because of how long it is, but I may chip away at it over the next year or two, and eventually beat Dicey Dungeons. But it's got some really cool gameplay mechanics, and each different dice you play as, they say dice instead of die, but each different dice you play as has a different thing, a different way the game works for it. So it keeps the gameplay fresh, especially early on, because all you have to do is attempt a dungeon as the one character, and then you unlock the next one.
Oh, okay.
And so, your first 6 attempts, you're playing as something totally different, and that was
switching things up a lot.
that was a good way to keep me invested for quite a while.
Cool. Well, I just looked, and this is actually in my secret game list, but I'm going to leave it to you in case you want to chip away at it. That's good to know now. My secret game list is very long, so I've got other options. That's really cool. Also, I thought you were going to say this isn't a good fit for today's secret game to synergize with Inscryption because it's about dice, not cards. I thought you were going to say that.
No, I think it works.
But-
I think it would have
Yeah.
synergized pretty well.
Okay, cool. Another thing that we both did is we played Resident Evil 2 for Halloween.
Yes, we did do that.
This is our annual Halloween party where we play through a horror game with friends. And what did you think of Resident Evil 2?
I liked it more than I thought I would. In general, when we pick AAA games for the Halloween party, I'm like, Yeah, all right. I'll show up and just, have some fun with friends. But I really found myself like unable to look away from the screen because while we were there, I was trying to work on some underplayed notes for an upcoming episode and I got
So, yeah, you
nothing
didn't
done.
get anything done.
Got
Wow.
nothing done because I
Cool.
was just so enthralled with the game.
I like that testament to how good it is. I played this on stream leading up to the party because I wanted to be the one person who had the ability to get us maybe unstuck if we got stuck. That didn't happen. We have some really good puzzle solvers and people who are good at geography in games, like in keeping maps straight. I got
Alex.
yeah, and I think Grant's pretty good at that. I think
Yeah, relatively.
Grant's really good at stories
Yeah.
too. It's always cool to see everybody's strengths come together in those games. And we finished it much faster than I thought we would. It took about 7.5 hours.
Yeah.
I expected us to take 8.5 to 9, just because every time we pass the controller, someone's got to learn the game sort of from scratch, and they might not have been there the whole time. And it can sometimes be like restarting a bit.
Yeah.
It was smooth, and
Yeah.
it was really good. And I had a great time both streaming this and playing it at the party. And I also played, we played the Leon campaign. I've played about half of the Claire campaign since, and I'm really liking that too. It changes up where she goes in the police station and beyond. So you see different things, but you see a lot of similar things too. So it's a cool balance. I can't wait to finish her campaign.
Rock on.
Did you have anything else?
Yep, I've
Okay.
got one more, right? Yes, one more. I played on Halloween, I played Slay the Princess.
Oh,
I took the night off because I was maxed out on vacation, and I'm like, "You know what? The pristine cut just came out. I've wanted to play Slay the Princess for, like, 2 years." So I played that for about 2 hours. I'm not very far at all, but, so far it's delivering on what I wanted, and what I wanted was attractive art and creepy visuals and good voice acting, and so far I'm getting that.
yeah. I didn't know it was fully voice acted.
Fully voice acted.
That's
It's
so
incredible.
cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like that'll when I eventually play it, that'll keep me going,
Yeah. And that
because it is a lot of text.
that one's in our big master list, so it will be
is.
featured on Underplayed someday.
Yes, it's in our horror lists. I can't wait. Uh, 2 more items. One is like 2 games in one. First one is I played through The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. This is the new Zelda game announced just earlier this year. I think they only announced it about 100 days or so before it actually came out, which was wild.
Now this is the one where you play as Zelda, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
it is indeed, and I had a blast with this. A lot of people are comparing this to Link's Awakening, which is a really old school Zelda game that got remade for the Switch several years ago. They're comparing it because it's got the similar look and perspective and just world size. I like this more than Link's Awakening. You can sort of absorb all these items and enemies in the world as echoes and then summon them yourself. And that sounds kind of chaotic. I was a little unsure about that idea before I played because I thought, what if there's a puzzle that requires a very specific echo or a very specific combo of echoes? Am I going to be able to figure that out? And actually, the game is super open ended, where you could come up with what feels like sometimes half a dozen or more solutions to many
Oh,
things.
cool.
And so everyone who plays this game is going to have their favorite echoes, and they're going to go back to those over and over again. And I've seen some people stream this game. I didn't stream this, but I've seen some people stream it who use things that I didn't even touch once,
Mhm.
and they use them constantly. And I think that's a really cool psychological examination of how everybody approaches puzzle solving and approaches using enemies against other enemies and all these things. I think it's a little overwhelming at a certain point with how many echoes you get. You get, uh, I don't even know how many, well over 100.
Oof.
And sometimes you're cycling through them and it can be hard to find the thing you want.
Can you like hotkey some of those?
You can sort them 5 different ways. You can sort them
Okay.
by like most recently acquired, most used, last used, alphabetical, and type
Okay.
are the different, but you can't hotkey specific ones. And I think that's intentional because the game wants you to use a wide variety of things. So if you could only hotkey like 4 things, that would actually feel really limited, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to exploration and side quests and dungeons and boss fights, all that stuff is very approachable and the perfect difficulty, in my opinion. I've played so many Zelda games where I get stuck or there's a moment where the difficulty spikes way too much. I didn't find that happening in this game. I think it's perfectly tuned. So that's another reason why I love it over other ones. Lastly, I just want to quickly touch on Diablo 4 and Fallout 4. These are games I constantly go back to. I'm trying to 100% Fallout 4. I'm very close as we sit down. I just have the rest of a DLC to go through. And then Diablo 4 got a significant update, and all my equipment got outdated by the update. So I had to re-find everything. All my stuff, it all had like a red skull on it because it was from the last patch.
Ooh.
And so everybody had to re-find gear, do like a loot grind.
That sucks.
Yeah. And you're finding like mostly similar things, but it's mindless fun. I love just throwing that on when I don't feel like absorbing a story and I just don't have much energy. So there you go. Well, that's what we did between seasons.
That was a lot more than I was anticipating.
That was a lot.
Yeah. We'll cut some of that out. Maybe you, the listener, won't know everything, but
we'll see. I can cut some of that down. But so that's everything we played. And before we move on, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, thank you. And we love you. If you haven't already, please consider giving us a follow and a 5-star rating on podcast services like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It should only take a few seconds, and we'd really appreciate it. And if you have a friend who loves indie games and discussions about indie games, maybe share our podcast with them too. That'd be a great way to get our podcast out to people. It is time now, finally, for our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. Secret games. Secret games.
Secret Games is our segment where we each review an indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. We don't talk about what we're picking in advance, so I don't know what Disco is about to review. He doesn't know what I'm going to review today. We can choose any indie game as long as we haven't reviewed it before on the show. Starting with you, DiscoCola, let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 67 of Underplayed.
My secret game this episode comes from, I'm going to pronounce it, Dume Games Studio, and it is called Astronite.
Astronite.
Yes.
I've never heard of this.
Well, I've just
not
said,
Astrobot.
Not Astrobot.
I played that one. That's not
you
indie.
got that one.
That's not indie.
I would never do that to you. I played Astronite.
Got it.
And you have that trailer now, so you can check that out.
Okay. Oh, it's one word.
Yeah. So yeah, Astronite is a Metroidvania that it claims 1-bit graphics in its description. I'm not really an expert, but unless it's like a trick of the eye or some sort of technicality, some of the backgrounds feature gray, which, as I understand, would make it not 1-bit.
Yeah.
As I understand.
Return of the Obra Dinn was 1-bit.
Yeah. And that one, like, very obviously felt 1-bit, but this has gray in it.
Okay.
So I don't know if it actually is 1-bit, but for the rest of the review, I'm going to call it 1-bit just because that's what it claims.
Yeah.
Um,
It's got a classic, very, very classic look.
Yeah, very.
We'll say
it is mostly just black and white.
Yeah.
Anyways, you play as the titular Astronite, and as for story, I'm actually just going to read the story section from the Steam page, lower down on the page. It goes, quote, "Mission 2205 is the last big chance for the ancient inhabitants of Neplia. Long ago, the inhabitants of Neplia discovered that a strange entity lived in the core of the planet. They studied it carefully, but were never able to decipher the riddle. After a while, the entity created a great army, which ended up taking their home from the inhabitants of Neplia, and now it's Astronite's turn, an intrepid space adventurer who will have to do everything possible to expel the invaders from his planet once and for all. So at the start of the game, like in most Metroidvania games, you crash land, something epic happens to you, and you lose access to all of the power-ups you arrived with. So you must now explore this planet and retrieve your power-ups to ultimately reach the core, and along the way, you're participating in boss fights and platforming challenges to test your mettle. And really, it's a pretty straightforward Metrovania. That seems to it really only seems to stand out as being different using its one quote 1-bit style.
Thinking about recent games, it does feel a little bit like Drifter.
It's you know when you gave me that rhyme at the beginning of the episode, I was like,
He knows.
he knows.
How does he know?
But yeah, I immediately thought of Astronite when you were going through that. But yeah, as for gameplay, before you lose all your power-ups, you have access to a jetpack, an air dash, as well as your more traditional like jump and shoot. You might have the charge shot at the beginning of the game. I don't think I tested to see if I had one, but either way, you do collect one eventually.
You may have been playing on hard mode, is what you're saying, accidentally.
Well, the beginning part before you lose your power-ups is very brief.
Okay.
So you're not facing anything too challenging. But yeah, of course you face challenges that are difficult or impossible until you get those upgrades back. And usually you get those upgrades back by defeating some boss on the planet. You will eventually be able to collect a currency called Spherty and buy other upgrades from the shop in the middle of the map. Upgrades could include upgrades to your health, to your weapon, or jetpack, or allowing you to see how much health a minor enemy has remaining. Astronite also has some fun little puzzles and secret rooms to find. A lot of these are optional, but many of them will have an upgrade or at least open up a shortcut that will be really useful. But it's, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. If you know about Metroidvania, this is a smaller Metroidvania, and that is the most efficient elevator pitch.
And so how long is this game, would you say?
I went for completion, and I think it took me 8 hours, but like some of it is more because of difficulty rather than size. As for what I like, the primary reason I bought the game, apart from being just hella on sale for the physical copy, I was really interested in the art style in this. I really like the big chibi sprite for Astronite in the 1-bit color style. I thought all the pixel art was executed really well, and it can be insanely difficult to get any sort of interesting detail using only 2-ish colors, but I think Astronite does it really well. The controls feel pretty stinking good at most times. There's only really 2 pain points I found in controlling Astronite. First is when you're using the jetpack and the fuel runs out, so recovering can get a little hairy. And then the other is something I would actually consider an early dislike. But when you access your iframes after taking damage, there's like a pretty significant window where your inputs are being eaten.
Oh.
So if you like fall into a spike pit, which happened to me a good number of times, just trying to jump so that you may attempt to escape
Doesn't register.
it gets pretty rough.
Okay.
But apart from that, controls feel pretty good. Shooting response is responsive. Jump height feels appropriate. Dashing especially feels really good once you get the dash, and once you upgrade it especially feels incredible. I like that boss fights are pretty fun. Most of them are pretty challenging, so I'm really thankful that they put like save spots pretty near to all the boss rooms because I died a lot. So I really appreciated having small treks back to boss rooms. It gets you back in the action a lot more quickly. So I really like that.
And not to bring up Drifter too much, but that's something that game I think you wished had more of.
Yeah, yeah.
More of the checkpoints.
There
more
were
of the
very, very few checkpoints in Drifter.
Yeah.
This doesn't have many more of them, but they are more conveniently placed, I think.
Cool.
And then the bosses themselves are surprisingly varied. We get to see some really cool significant flexing in the design area. So I appreciate all the different boss designs. The secret rooms in this game are some of my favorite secret rooms in a game. Many of them contain like Astronite-ified versions of arcade titles.
Oh.
So one room might ask me to like do a level of Breakout.
Oh.
But another one has me playing Pac-Man. And it's kind of a fun little break from the platforming.
I would get sidetracked so hard doing that.
I think you would find that to be pretty dope. A really nice
Yeah.
respite from the rest of the game.
Cool.
And then generally, I think the level design is actually really solid. With the exception of one zone pretty early on, the platforming is all arranged in a way where you pretty much always know where you're supposed to go and what you're on your way to find so that you can come back to some of these spots that are out of reach. And additionally, on a similar note, like most of the locked doors, it's usually pretty clear what you need to get around them because there's like 4 or 5 different kinds of door in the game. And so it's pretty easy to tell like what kind of weapon or upgrade you need to get through those.
Classic Metroid rules.
Yeah. So really good design in the level design arena for sure. Things I don't love, there's really only like 2 things that I don't like about Astronite, but one of them's pretty significant. First is that I don't really care much about my mission or anyone I'm really interacting with. I don't always have to care about my character in a Metroidvania. Most Metroid games, specifically Metroid, the story is not even like a remote concern of mine. I am Samus, I'm on a planet, and
Sure.
I'm getting cool stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I actually didn't like about Metroid Dread was just like how much I was talking to Adam in that game.
I remember that.
It was a bit too much for me compared to like other Metroids.
You just hit the nail on the head of like, in the back of my mind, I was trying to figure out like, why is this feeling a little bit different? I loved that game, but yeah, that was a difference.
It was pretty different. But yeah, in Astronite, I kind of wanted to I just wanted to go. There's an attempt to get me to care about some of the characters, and I do get most of the way there, but I'm just not invested, and I'm especially least invested in Astronite himself. Like,
Okay.
he's just a cute character with a cool spacesuit. That's all I need. But my biggest complaint is in the platforming difficulty. Now, subjectively speaking, I don't think the platforming itself is that much harder than some other Metroidvanias. Like if you're watching that trailer, I think you see like what I consider the hardest room in the game. But Astronite's missing like one key mechanic that I think would really elevate the game to an entire new level. And maybe it's missing on purpose to make it a challenging game. But Astronite does not have a healing element.
Oh.
You can't like focus your soul in Hollow Knight. You can't collect flasks like in Blasphemous. You can't just like murder small aliens to farm health like in Metroid.
Yeah.
So
we've all been there.
Yeah. All you have are your 3 to 7 hit points to get you from one save point to another, because that's the only thing that heals you in the game, with one exception.
So every time you're starting at a checkpoint and you take 2 steps and you accidentally take a hit, you're thinking, oh, that's just one less hit I have to work with in the next room and the next room.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of these platforming challenges get pretty heckin' rough pretty fast. But on top of that, you know, in other games, maybe the stakes aren't super high if you do die. In this game, it's a little bit like Hollow Knight. You lose all of your currency until you go back and collect your little like ghost spirit thing. So what that means is you're going through the same gauntlet that just spanked you and hoping that you can get all of your currency back. And maybe you won't, and maybe you will just lose everything. You'll be flat broke. And that happened to me a lot.
It's Souls rules.
Yeah, it got really rough.
Dang.
There is an upgrade later in the game that you can buy that lets you keep 25% of your currency when you die. But that's still like...
It's still a chunk of change.
It depletes really quickly.
So this is why, you know, it's taking you 8 hours. It seems like a short game like Zeo Drifter, but this is why you say a lot of that time is sort of the repetition and the trial and error and
Yep.
just getting better and learning the patterns, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll jump to this real quick. There's an upgrade in the game that gives you double damage, and it feels really necessary because about a third of the way through the game, the main antagonist amplifies the hit points for all of the minor enemies. So it's not even like halfway or three-fourths of the way through the game where your enemies are just like doubled in health.
Okay.
It's very
Yeah.
early. So you're like,
So it's a necessary upgrade to sort of offset this thing that already happens.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's the most expensive item in the game. So I'm
Okay.
like, I'm losing money left and right, and I can't even hope to get to this stupid double damage upgrade.
Dang.
So I did eventually have to just, because I lost all of like the boss money and all of the money from chests. And there's a good amount of chests with a good amount of money in them, but I lost them. I lost all of it. And
Shoot.
so I did have to spend like an hour just grinding
Grinding.
on enemies to get to like 3,700 currency to buy this upgrade.
Ugh.
So that got really rough, and it got to a certain point where it was like I was in denial about having to do that grinding, but I was like, I knew that I was going to have to do that at a certain point. So
That's like taking a detour into almost playing a new game
yeah,
for a moment.
that is a great way to describe it. That's exactly what it feels like. But yeah, all this is to say that because I can't heal, saving money is an absolute nightmare. If I could heal, I think I would have enjoyed this game like way, way more. I do have one other small thing that I didn't really love so much. There are a few spots on the map where a marker system would have really been helpful.
Hmm.
But in a lot of cases, it's not too difficult to teleport to a spot that's close. Like in most cases, there are a couple of spots on the map where there's not really a good shortcut to get from one end to the other. And until you get about halfway through the game, there's still a lot that's not interconnected. So it can take a little bit longer there. And some markers would have been helpful so I know what to go back to. But otherwise, Astronite has loads of great strengths. I love the visual identity. I love the power ups. I love finding the secrets. And I really love unlocking the shortcuts in this game. It has so many elements of a great Metroidvania, but without the ability to heal, I faced a lot of frustrations and I just lost so much money. Just having that one skill, or even the ability to maybe just buy back my spirit, like maybe
Yeah.
abandon, teleport back to the shop and grind a smaller amount of money to buy back my spirit, that would have elevated this game for me by probably a whole point. All the same, I still think about how I want to play it again because I think I could play it better, and I want to try it again because I did have a lot of fun.
And you'd probably play it in a fraction of the time, or
I
you'd be able to
think
get through.
I think I could. It's not Metroidvanias are the most likely genre to do that to me, but they don't always like make me feel that way. Astronite does still make me feel that way, so I do still give it a mostly positive score, an 8.0 out of 10.
I'm glad you had a great time with it overall. Like, I love how you describe this as the character being like a chibi-fied version of other characters we might see in
Mhm.
these like sci-fi platforming Metroidvania games. I always am curious about this question with any Metroidvania because every Metroidvania tends to have two main pillars in gameplay, and I'm thinking of platforming and combat.
Mhm.
And then there's also like exploration slash puzzle solving, but I don't know that that applies as much here. But do you adore the platforming here or the combat more?
The combat's actually pretty stale, because all you do is you have the one gun, and eventually you get a charge shot, but that's about it. Most of the combat is actually platforming.
Right.
So you're
It's baked
figuring out
into the just DNA of everything you're doing.
you're just trying to figure out how to dodge until you get the opening
Yeah.
is most of what combat is.
I think the trailer shows that off really well. There's a part in a boss room where there's a bullet heck, I'll say, going on, and you sort of jump over those to expose a window where you can take a shot.
Yep.
That kind of thing's going on.
And another thing about the boss fights is that I mentioned that they were pretty challenging, but after you've attempted them maybe 8 to 12 times, you really like get it down. There's no new tells really. Like
Yeah.
the patterns, once you learn them, are very predictable.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Where can you play Astronite?
You can play Astronite on PS5. I played it physically on PS4. It's on Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, Windows, Xbox Series X and S.
Wonderful. It is time for my secret game. My secret game is like Inscryption, a creepy horror experience. And I didn't even necessarily try to make this alignment. It's just that I was playing this game a lot recently. I thought, this should be the first secret game of mine for the season. My secret game is called Grunn.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I have heard of Grunn, and I've seen a little bit of gameplay, but given how much you and our friend Emily have played it, I haven't seen that much of it.
Yeah, so
So-
I'm excited for you to learn about it. I'm very excited to share about this game with you.
Yeah, I know that you love this one.
I do.
I already have like a pretty good prediction about your score, I think.
So Grunn is a 2024 adventure slash mystery slash gardening time loopish horror game. It was developed by Tom Vanden Boogart. I hope I'm saying that name right. Tom is a member of Sock Pop Collective, a collective of indie game developers. They have tons of games under their belt. I think we have briefly mentioned them before. If you go to Steam, you can see that they have developed slash published dozens of games, many dozens of games total. They just are always coming out with very interesting, experimental, tinier games. And Grunn is one of the more recent ones. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "A gardener gets hired for maintenance work over the weekend. A simple task, but strangely, some tools are missing. The owner of the garden isn't around, and their house is off limits. Perhaps new tools can be found in the mysterious town, or maybe some of the reserved townsfolk have seen them." End quote. I want to thank future friends for gifting me a key to this game. I knew Grunn was coming out. I was keeping my eyes peeled, and they put a call out, and I'm just very thankful to them for being willing to give me a key to a game that I then streamed and had a great time with. Spoiler alert, I had a great time. I've been looking forward to this game for a while. I played it in Next Fest. I played the demo for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
The demo is substantial. It's not close to the whole game, but it gives you lots of opportunities to look for endings and to explore, do trial and error. And I figured out everything I could in that demo. And I actually collaborated with, again, Emily to figure that out because she was really into the demo at the time too. So we were messaging each other constantly, trying to figure things out, comparing notes. And now that the full game is out, I was able to do even more of that. And so in this game, it is billed as a, quote, very normal gardening game. And it's like, that's a cornerstone to the marketing of this game, actually, and I love that. And it opens with a text card that says, "You are about to play Grunn, which is a very normal gardening game inspired by my father's garden deep in the Dutch countryside. Have fun." End quote. So that's what Tom says to us. He's talking to us at the beginning of this game through this text card. And this is a first-person game where you play as a gardener cleaning up a property over a Saturday and Sunday for someone who lives in a big house and they are away. You are dropped off at a bus stop on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. You cross a small bridge to get to their property, and along the way, you find Polaroids scattered around. And these Polaroids point out various features or things you will see in and around the garden. So one of the Polaroids will show the shed that you're staying in. One of them will show the toilet that's nearby. Some of them are strange. You don't know what they are, but you go to the small shed where you're staying next to the big house, and the owner has left you a note that says, quote, "Dear gardener, please make sure my garden is presentable by Monday. You are allowed to take the shears, trowel, and watering can from this shed, but please note that my house is off limits. I would also advise you to not wander off during the night. It gets cold and foggy up here in the north. It is possible that I require your assistance in something other than gardening later this weekend. In that case, I will contact you through the phone in the corner. I expect you are up to the task." End quote.
Not mysterious at all.
No, no. So you get a list of chores: cutting grass, trimming hedges, picking up trash, digging up molehills, and watering plants. So you have to do 5 things, it seems like. But there are some odd things you start to notice. In the shed, only the shears are available as a tool to you. The trowel and the watering can are missing. So you're like, huh? How do I do those jobs? Also, there's a plank in a fence next to the house that's rotten, and you can rip it off to reveal a side room of the house, and you can enter that side room. And when you go into that side room to pick something up, you turn around and there's a person with a very long neck staring at you through the door before running away.
What?
There's also that toilet nearby, which is unlocked with a key found in your shed. And when you open it, one of the stalls is locked and there's a strange person inside. So those are just a couple examples of odd things going on.
Yeah.
You feel like you're not alone. There are people around this place. Who are they? Why do I have this eerie feeling? And there's this percentage that's tracked of all the chores that you do in the garden. And the in-game time passes pretty quickly. It starts elapsing as soon as you do your first chore. As soon as you pick up the shears or start doing any chore, the time will start elapsing. And you have to move fast if you want to get everything done. And so you find more Polaroids pointing you in new directions. Eventually, you can open a gate to a churchyard that's adjacent to the garden. And in the distance, you can see a park across a bridge that's closed down. And you can find your way to that park. You can find your way into the church and through the other side of the church back onto the road that brought the bus carrying you. Next to that road, there's a cornfield, a gas station, a ferry, and a side path near the house that you're cleaning up. So all these places sort of connect to each other eventually. And there are a few townsfolk you can run into, but you can't understand what any of them say. You'll try to talk to them and they'll just mumble, or they'll say, some language you can't decipher.
Okay.
And what this game is about becomes more than just cleaning up this person's property. It becomes about, I know. It becomes about using items and clues to unravel a mystery and to eventually do much more than gardening. So Grunn has 11 different endings. Each run, or Grunn, if you will, can take you anywhere from 1 minute to 1 hour, I would say.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in the process, you find that this tiny world is dangerous and haunted and supernatural. I will spare all other details because I think this game is quite special and surprising. And what I liked about this game is pretty much everything, DiscoCola.
I'm shocked.
I am in love with this game. I am completely transfixed by it. I've played this game for about 10 hours. I think I've experienced everything this game can show me. I have found every item. I've done every achievement. I've hypothesized about every little detail. I have done so many experiments and tests about so many areas and objects and combinations and going to certain places at certain times. I've talked to streamer friends about what everything means and what we've each found. I've chased personal best times to get the true ending, which I can achieve without menu quitting in about 7 minutes.
Nice.
So in about 7 minutes, I can do the true ending in the most efficient way that I know how. And I think the personality of this world is singular. That's one of the reasons I love exploring this place. There's this persistent eeriness. You constantly feel like you're being watched, and often you are. Often you're within feet of something looking at you, and you don't even realize it. You'll catch people looking at you from above through windows, and I just get chills down my spine so much in this game. There are also jump scares that happen here and there. It's not an overwhelming amount, but this is a horror game, and I'm getting scared in this game. And I know that's not for everybody, but I think the amount of scares is fun, and I just want to keep exploring, even though I'm afraid of getting jump scared here and there. If you don't mind jump scares, I think you're going to have a great time. I love the color palette of this world. There's this mixture of like what to me look like pastel colors, but also dark colors. And they look sort of aberrated. They look like they're kind of glitchy
Yeah.
sometimes. I don't really know how else to describe it, but I can't think of many games that look like this. And also, aside from color, there's this low poly mesh of the world that I think is a really conscious decision here. When things are low poly, sometimes it can feel a little bit like an arbitrary decision in other
Mhm.
games. But here, I think the low poly stuff adds an uncanniness
I agree.
a bit,
Yeah.
especially to people that you run into. You can see them in the trailer for the game if you're curious to see what they look like. But these odd people are just sort of looking at you with these strangely shaped bodies and faces. And so you just feel like everything is eerie because of that choice. There are many optional tasks and hidden uses for items that reward experimentation. I won't reveal all the different tools you can find, but I was using tools in so many ways. I'd find something new and I'd just walk around, just trying things. And I'd sometimes find stuff that I wouldn't have found if I hadn't just been willing to try using this thing everywhere. And that feels so good when you find that. And there was nothing really pointing you there. One particular task that I loved required finding instruments for a band performance in the park. And the band only performs on Sunday. And so there's this rush to find all these instruments and to get this band together. And it's this nice little moment, but you have to do work to figure out how to get all the instruments, how to get them before Sunday. And you definitely have to avoid doing some things so you have enough time to do that. And
Mhm.
so that's also where I think of games like Outer Wilds. I think of Outer Wilds in this game because Outer Wilds was very much about doing time loops, choosing what to focus on in each of your loops, knowing you only have 22 minutes before the sun explodes in that game to do what you want to do. In this game, the time is elapsing fast, and you sometimes have to pause the game and think about, what do I want to do this run on this Grunn? And and that's really fun for me to do, to sort of build this checklist in my mind, and I'm always learning about this world. I'm learning something new every time I step into this world. This game goes to so many places. It's chock full of spine-tingling moments that I want every mystery and horror fan to experience. For dislikes, I have literally no notable dislikes about this game other than I wish there was more. I would play an expanded version of this world. I would explore new areas connected onto this world. I just want more of this imagination from this developer. So Grunn sort of lives in my soul now. It feels like a game that's changed my DNA.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10.
Whoa, baby. Whoa, baby. That's even higher than I guessed early on.
And it's playable on PC, which is the version I played, and Mac. I think this game is, again, singular. I have never played a game quite like this. I can play it for hours and hours and not feel the time pass. I love talking about it with other people. I love watching other people play. I love seeing how people discover things that I didn't for hours and hours. There's this item you can find for another character, I'll say. I saw this streamer find that item accidentally, and it took me like 6 hours to find that item. They were just using an item sort of wildly, and then they accidentally did it, and they're like, "Oh my god, I just got this thing." And it blew my mind because it just like immediately showed me that this person now might be on a path to discovering secrets in this game that is wildly different than the path that I took.
Mhm.
And you just continuously unravel more and more and more. And where this game goes is completely surprising. You've seen stories and ideas like this in other games and shows and movies and stuff, but just how much is crammed into this game by the end is pretty spectacular. And you also sort of don't have a great sense of how much you have left sometimes. And so that's exciting. It's like, how much is waiting for me in this world? So those are all the reasons why I love Grunn.
Wow. Man, I got to tell you, every time I come to the episode with a 10, I'm like, I just think about it days ahead of time. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for this episode.
Mhm.
One question I want to ask you is how much of the enjoyment you get from this comes from collaborating with other players, like specifically Emily. I think that would be like a fun thing to figure out, especially given how new this game is right now. I don't always love playing games when they're brand new. Usually I like to have the answer out there on the internet somewhere. But I could see this being really fun, just like solving a mystery together.
I genuinely think I would think this is a 10 if I knew no other people who were playing it, but talking about it with other people is extraordinarily fun.
Cool.
And I don't get to do that often because how many games do you play where it's purely about mystery and experimentation and you have many options of where to go and it's a game not many people know that well, so it's hard to both find people to talk to about it and also look stuff up about it if you want to try to find a spoiler. That doesn't happen very often, and so that it feels like a very special moment to play this game while it's still new. I don't think a lot of people will end up playing this compared to, like, one of our featured games.
Yeah, I think this, just from the visuals alone, will be a niche appeal.
Mhm. The visuals are what drew me in at first. It's what put it on my radar. I saw it in a showcase. You see these hands with these shears cutting grass, and the sound effects in this game are magnificent, by the way. The clipping of the grass is such an auditory pleasure. But that snipping, that clipping of grass in the first person, along with the phrase, "This is a very normal gardening game," but then something off kilter sort of happens in the trailer. All of that sold me. And then what was waiting for me was just surprise after surprise and mystery after mystery. And yeah, going back to talking about it with other people, it is so fun to compare notes and just be like, "Do you know what this does?" And they're like, I haven't found that yet." And then other times, we each kinda know one half about something, and so we put that together. That is super fun in this game.
Cool. Yeah, I've wanted to play this, and then hearing how much you've loved it, because you've talked about this on stream a good number of times, and maybe even just in private conversations. So like,
Yeah. I think I talked about it previously on this show after playing the demo and
you
loving
have
it.
for sure,
Yeah.
but I've definitely heard about it from you outside of the show. And whenever either one of us is like especially passionate about a game, like that's usually a good sign. So
Mhm.
I've definitely wanted to try it. I love the creepy vibes of video games, and I love low poly, and
Yeah.
this sort of has like a whatever the low poly version of squiggle vision is
Yeah.
essentially what's going on.
Yeah, when you're standing there just looking at somebody, they do kinda, like, vibrate
Yeah.
in a way. Yeah.
And so that adds to the like weirdness, the soupiness of everything.
It does.
The only other thing I will say is that I hope you will submit a speedrun time for any % true ending and keep that world record for a while.
I don't have close to the world record. I looked up a video.
Oh, okay.
Someone can do it in, like, 5.5 minutes, which is,
Okay.
like, 2 minutes faster than me. And what they're doing is they're using mouse and keyboard with, like, the highest sensitivity, and they're quitting to the menu. They're, like, finding checkpoints and then
Yeah.
quitting to the menu. I don't like stuff like that.
Okay. I thought maybe it was just early enough that you could be like, I've got
No.
it for a while.
There are so few people playing this probably that I there probably aren't that many speed grunners.
Yeah.
But I'm probably in the top, I don't know, 100 for
Yeah.
all I know. So I'll take that and be proud of that.
Yes. Okay. Perfect.
So those are our secret games, Astronite and Grunn. Let's move on to our review of Inscryption. It is our featured game. Inscryption is a 2021 roguelike deck-building horror game. It was developed by Daniel Mullins Games and published by Devolver Digital. We love Devolver Digital here. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Inscryption is an inky black card-based odyssey that blends the deck-building roguelike, escape room-style puzzles, and psychological horror into a blood-laced smoothie. Darker still are the secrets inscribed upon the cards, end quote. This is going to be a very interesting setup for a game because this game is fragile when it comes to spoilers. I want to warn listeners that this game has a lot going on. It's got a lot under the surface. It has that reputation for being a surprising game, kind of like Grunn. There are layers to both the gameplay and the storytelling. So we're going to have to talk about some details, maybe more so than we would for other games. We do try to avoid spoilers, but we will have to discuss some things that you might not want to know if you haven't played Inscryption before.
Mhm.
So please use caution with this review and just know from this point forward, assume that you might hear things that you might not want to hear if you haven't played. So we encourage you to play the game. I think we would both encourage listeners to play the game.
Yeah. Even though I had been looking forward to this for a super long time, I managed to not watch hardly any gameplay of this, and that was the correct decision.
I'm so happy you did that. I'm also so happy that I somehow managed to avoid spoilers and things because I know lots of people who love this.
Yeah.
And every time I hear about it, people are like, oh my gosh, I love Inscryption. I've heard some people say it's my favorite game. It's one of my favorite games. But they never say more than that.
Yeah.
They never say more than that.
I
think it's
never expected it to go where it went. So
me neither. And I think there's that shared sort of universal understanding that we talk about how much we love it. We don't talk about why we love it or what happens.
mhm.
But we're going to have to do a little bit of that here. So also, now that we're kind of fully in semi-spoilers, I'll say that this game has several acts going on.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to mostly talk about Act 1 right now. And when I talk about the setting of Act 1, I'll throw it to you to talk about the gameplay, the card game going on.
Okay, cool.
And
I've
then we
kind of got that separated by acts.
Okay,
too.
cool.
Yeah.
And so then we can kind of flip back and forth if we need to. So when you start Inscryption, you see a menu screen that says New Game, which you can't select. You have to select Continue, which is weird. It's odd.
Yeah.
It's already odd.
Yep.
And then if you select Continue, you find yourself in a cabin sitting across from a dark figure who says, perhaps you've forgotten how this game is played. Allow me to remind you. And this is what kicks off the gameplay of Inscryption, where we begin learning this card game.
Yeah. As far as the card game goes, you have like a starter deck that you have. It's just like 4 or 5 cards, I think. And then you have a side deck of squirrels,
Yep.
which are free to play. And you'll be able to draw from either your squirrel deck or your main deck at the start of each turn. And you'll be able to place your cards in one of 4 lanes. Typically, you're going to want to start with a squirrel because it costs nothing to play. And you have to do sacrifices equal to the blood drops on the card you want to play. So if you draw a card that has 3 blood drops worth of cost to play, you're going to have 3 bodies already on the board. So those tend to be played turn 2, turn 3, just depending on what you have.
Yeah, and I have very few touch points for card games like this. But this game, in ways, reminds me of some of the ones I've played. It reminds me of Magic the Gathering in some ways. It reminds me of Yu-Gi-Oh! In some ways.
And I've also heard Hearthstone.
Yes,
as
I've heard that
a
comparison
as
yes. Yeah, that actually might be a better comparison.
well. So you will place your animal cards on the board in an attempt to defeat your opponent, who is also placing cards. The difference between you and your opponent is that you can see what they're going to play on their next turn so that you can strategize ahead. So it's our friend Drake calls it more of a puzzle game than a card game because you're really planning and strategizing. And as I watched you stream it, that became much more apparent because I was just kind of like throwing stuff out there a little bit more than you were. But
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I want to hear more about that later, maybe. But yeah, for me, this game did kind of become a puzzle game where every turn I'm choosing to look at that backfield of cards of my opponent to see what are they about to play and how do I need to react. Because often they can play better stuff sooner than I can, but my advantage is that I can react. They don't really react to me as much, it
Right.
seems like.
Yeah. And so that's just the card fight. You also have access to items. Some of these will cut your opponent's card in half, removing it from the game.
Love that one.
You can skip your opponent's turn sometimes. You can grab one of their cards and pull it to your side of the field. And what you have to do ultimately is deal damage directly to the player. And you are doing this using a scale. So if your opponent damages you with 2 damage, that scale is 2 damage on your side. So you have to do that 2 damage plus another 5 or 6 in order to win the game.
Yeah.
And this is damage to the player, which means you have to either swing damage over your opponent's cards or destroy your opponent's cards and then hit the player directly.
Yeah, so you can really make a comeback.
Mhm.
You could sometimes be one hit away from losing, but then if you find momentum, you can completely reverse the game.
Yep.
And the damage previously dealt to you can be undone.
Yeah, it's totally irrelevant at that point. So that's just the card game. Outside of the like actual card fight, the rest of the game is it's all being played on this like tabletop in the cabin. And in between card fight rounds, your opponent will roll out a map and you will be able to select from a predetermined path which has different events on it. Think of something like Slay the Spire, where you're planning on going to a campfire to maybe increase health or damage of a card, or going to the wood carver to get a totem which will add a passive ability to a certain species of card. Or you'll go to the trapper, which will sell you pelts based on how many teeth you have,
Right.
which is a bit of currency you get from doing overkill damage to your opponent. And there's several other types of events, so you can use that map to strategize how you want the end of your deck to look like based on what is in the path ahead of you. So if I happen to have picked up a wolf totem, a canine totem with a really cool ability, maybe I'm going to start looking for something that will either put extra sigils on all of my wolves or grant me a wolf card specifically. And I'll start choosing paths that will get me to where I want to go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is the roguelike part of this game is that map.
Mhm.
That's a huge part of it, along with the randomization of what's going to happen on those points that you pick.
Yep. And then there's sigils. So these sigils each have a special ability. Just to give an example of a few, there is bifurcation, which can't not be the first thing I think of, where you attack both lanes to the left of you and to the right of you, but you don't attack directly in front of you.
Right.
Or there's one that's unkillable. So if your card with an unkillable sigil dies, you get a copy of it in your hand. And you could choose to play it again with the same cost that you usually have to play it.
And a lot of times the sigils thematically fit the card that you're playing. Like cockroach, it has unkillable.
Yeah.
You know, because cockroaches are hard to kill.
Right, exactly.
So there's a logic to
Yep.
it.
And like a toad will have, or the bullfrog, sorry.
You're right.
The bullfrog will have the sigil that allows
The
it to
leaping
prevent,
defense, yeah.
prevent airborne
Yeah.
damage.
In Magic the Gathering, it's called Reach.
Yeah.
There are flying creatures in MTG, and then I think the ones that can block flying are called Reach. I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
I will take your word for it. But so there's a lot of that, and you can strategize based on what sigils are in your deck. And there are events that allow you to move sigils from one card to another by eliminating that card. So there's a lot you can do in this card game, and I think that's it. Apart from that, you can also step away from the table in between events and explore the cabin, and within the cabin are a few puzzles, some of them more obvious than others, and this will allow you to add upgrades to your just overall ability to play the game, but also will progress the story.
So it's necessary to play the card game and to explore the cabin. The cabin feels like an escape room.
Mhm.
You're walking around, you're looking at things. You can't interact with everything at first. And then sometimes you find clues and items that lead you back to those places and you go, oh, now it's time to do that. Kind of like when you're in an escape room. So as we're playing cards, I think you've expressed this really well. We're playing with beasts and animals
Mhm.
and insects, all like living things are on these cards. But as we play the cards, we notice that there's this stoat in our deck that starts talking to us. It's talking to us. Like it is, words are popping up on the card.
Mhm.
And it seems like this stoat is carrying memories from the past. And it's even remembering what you do to it across all the games that you're playing against this shadowy creature. And when you sacrifice it to play another creature, it might say, oh, no, not again, or no, don't do that. And
Mhm.
it will go away. So there's like that eerie moment of like, oh, am I hurting this thing?
Yeah.
And then the dark figure that you're playing against is called Leshy. And your goal becomes not only to play his card game, but to explore that cabin on foot and find items, discover more secrets. And where this game goes is completely unpredictable. This is just the first act in the game. And each act unravels more and more about the game of Inscryption, both the one that you're playing in the cabin and the game that you're playing in general in the context of the world, I'll say.
Yeah.
So there's a meta story going on that involves many more aspects. And I think we might touch on those, but I'm kind of easing into that stuff. So that's the story / setting / gameplay setup. Now there's act 2 and there's act 3 and there's
Yep.
more. Is there anything you want to say about those
I
just to
think
set them up?
I think
they'll
this would
come
be
up.
the maximum of what I would want to know before
Okay.
we move any further. So if you wanna go in, you've never seen maybe more than just like trailers worth of gameplay, and you want to go in unsullied as far as like where the story goes, and this story goes to weird and wild places. This is your last stop, man.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're nonstop to Rio coming up next.
I was going to mention something about the history and significance of the game, and actually you saying that, this is this point. I'm not going to say this yet. Sorry, this is the most confusing review. But there's something more we'll want to say later about this game's existence. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Daniel Mullins has developed lots of games. I have only previously played Pony Island. Have you heard of Pony Island?
You've mentioned Pony Island
Okay.
on the show before.
Pony Island is another sort of surprising, disorienting, mysterious game that seems like a lot simpler on the surface, and then there's more and more that you uncover, and it gets pretty demented and wild. Daniel Mullins is working on Pony Island 2, and we saw a trailer of that at the Game Awards 2023. I think it's supposed to come out in 2025 or something like that. And Daniel has also developed tons of games that you can find on itch.io. Inscryption won tons of awards at the British Academy Game Awards, the DICE Awards, GDC Awards, IGF Awards, etc. It won Game of the Year for many notable publications like Polygon, Time, and Ars Technica. So this is a highly lauded game. I think there are over 100,000 reviews for this game on Steam. Not even like people who have bought the game, like the people from the people who have bought it who have reviewed the game.
Warranted.
Huge, big seller in the indie game world. This is not an underplayed game, right? But it is an indie game that is higher profile, and we're opening the season with it. DiscoCola, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, okay. Thoughts. I think that this game was well worth my weight, just to put it bluntly. But I'll get into stuff that I like about it. Apart from just the overall, like, really enjoyable, fun card game at its core, the thing that stands out to me, first and foremost, this might surprise you, is like the sound effects in this game.
Mm.
I think this is some of the best sound effects in games that I've ever played.
Ooh, yeah, you're actually I don't know if you can see him. I'm starting to get
I
goosebumps
can't see him right
thinking
now, but
I'm
I've
start
seen him before.
I'm
Oh,
starting to
there they
get
are.
them because
Yep.
I'm thinking about certain sound effects.
Yeah, like the sound of the card being destroyed.
Yes.
Your bone tokens piling up. The sound of the teeth falling onto the scales. Clink, clink,
Oh,
clink, clink.
yeah.
The sound of, like, just like that duplicate mushroom that shows up when you find a card you can choose that you already have in your deck. There's just this little mushroom that goes,
Yeah.
and it's so cool. The sounds that PO3 makes in Act 3, the sound effects in this game are immaculate. I think they are incredible, and they make every decision in the game feel important.
Yeah, they add weight to things. I'm thinking of when you find a campfire and you're trying to power up a card. At campfires, there's this risk reward thing of you're trying to power up a card, but there's this camp of hungry dudes and they're like eyeing your card and they
Mhm.
might eat it
Yeah.
when you try to upgrade it again.
Yep.
And so like when it gets destroyed, that's such a awful feeling. And there's sound that adds that gravity to
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh, and the little, it's not maybe a sound effect, but a stinger when you sacrifice a card to add a sigil to another card. Just that doom,
Doom,
that
yeah.
it plays. I
Yeah.
love it. I
It's so
love it.
good.
It all sounds so great.
And that's sort of part of the horror ambiance too, because a lot of it is like it's scary sound design, I would
Mhm.
say. So like that's adding to the genre of horror, but I would say that horror is just one of many genres going on
Yeah.
too.
I love slowly solving the puzzles in the cabin and in the factory. At times that's what I look forward to the most. It's like, oh, here's what I need to get on the oil painting so that I can unlock the next little thing behind
Yeah.
it.
So you love like walking around.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the actual act of walking around is not my favorite, but like trying to figure out what the puzzles, what they are, how they change based on my progress.
Right.
I love checking that stuff out and figuring it all out. And just I want to uncover all the secrets.
Mhm.
I missed a couple. I missed a couple in the factory, but I want to know.
Early question for you. Did you find that solving the secrets, figuring out the quote unquote escape room stuff, did you find that it was a nice break from the card game after you had been playing the card game for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first ones we solve is the safe. It becomes clear that we get a reward for solving a lot of these that will help make defeating Leshy easier.
Yeah.
And so like it's worth it for me to, if I just got totally spanked on my last run, I'm like, all right, let me see if some of these puzzles have changed. Let me see if I can maybe brute force a couple of them. Maybe that will help me on the next one. I love doing that.
There's meta progression going on, and it's not like you're in this cabin and you're just trying to find a combination to a lock on a door so that you can get out. The things you're doing, like you said, are helping you out and making you feel like you can do the game better
Mhm.
and faster.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And like, man, when I got bees in the game,
Yeah.
that was like totally changed the way I played after
Interesting.
that. Cuz like I would focus on trying to find an insect totem with a really good sigil, and that really made a huge difference.
Wow. And that's wild to me because I barely found the bees. Like, I think I found the bees once and I didn't really even use them.
Yeah. You got pretty close to the end of Leshy sooner than I did, I think. Another thing I love is when I get to the end, whether I've won or lost, and I get an insanely overpowered death card for me to find in the next one. And I'm just like, if I have a card
Yeah.
that's got like bifurcation on it and
Oh,
5 damage,
yes.
like forget about it. I've already won the next game. Like it's so cool.
Perfect. Yeah, you're like inheriting powerful cards on successive runs. The death cards are a really cool idea where at the end of a run, Leshy will pull out his camera and take a picture of you and creates a card that you can possibly find in the future using combinations of cards that are in your deck. And that was thrilling. That always gave me like a little boost to go into the next run.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. I mentioned this in setting up some of the rules of the game, but I love granting sigils to cards and totally changing their behavior. So suddenly having something unkillable with bifurcation and a low cost, that's just a reward enough for starting a run. Like
Mhm.
even if I lose, at least I had that card because I had so much fun. I love strategizing based on whatever totem I have and how it can alter the state of my run. It's something that I ignored very early in the game, but
Yeah.
since I've been playing Casey's mod a lot
Oh,
lately,
yeah.
I've been paying a lot more attention to my totem, and I really focus on getting a good one pretty early on. And then in acts 2 and 3, I get to experience totally different play styles in one ecosystem. Now, while this is overwhelming at first, I do eventually get into a card game that gets really nuanced, and you can get the sense of how each different card can sort of synergize with one another to the point where you can sometimes make like infinite plays,
Mhm.
and it gets really cool and really fun.
Yeah.
Even though there's like, in my opinion, a close to an overwhelming amount of systems at play, it gets really enjoyable when you start to figure out this card really synergizes well with this ecosystem and this one with this one.
There's an achievement slash trophy, I think you got it, where you have to deal like 666 damage
Yeah.
with one card,
That's a
which
time-consuming one, but it's
right.
pretty cool.
It's stuff that reminds me of the challenges from Slay the Spire, where it's like, how could I ever build a deck of 5 cards and Slay the Spire? Like, but there are ways to do it. The
Yep.
more you figure out all the different systems, all the different cards, all the different characters in that game, you realize it's possible. And here there are similar things going on where this is on the surface one of the simplest card games I've ever played.
Yeah.
It doesn't require that much explanation, but because of all the sigils and all the effects, all the ways cards can influence each other eventually, there are crazy possibilities.
Insane combinations. It's nuts. I like that Act 2 has a full set of cards to collect.
Oh, yeah.
When I buy card games, I'm not buying it to play, I'm buying it to collect a set, and I'm glad that I get to do that, at least in Act 2.
And Act 2 simulates that good brain juice feeling of opening up a booster pack.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what did I get? I get a rare in every one.
Yeah,
You know,
and
that's going on.
you get access to more booster packs the better you play against other NPC characters. And I like how Act 3 returns to more of a gameplay style closer to Act 1, but introduces all of those different like cost ecosystems in a really cool way. Things that I don't like as much, as cool as collecting all the different cards actually is, and solving a couple of the puzzles in Act 2, overall, Act 2 was a bit of a letdown between Acts 1 and 3, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Even though I generally prefer like pixel art games overall, I still had more fun with Acts 1 and 3 a little bit more than Act 2, regardless of the art style. But that's really it as far as dislikes go. Overall, I've been looking forward to this game for a super long time, and it exceeded my expectations.
Oh.
I love it so much.
Ah.
I did notice a few clues here and there that I wrote down, but I don't really have the patience to participate in like the really, really big overarching game that we'll talk about in a little bit.
We will talk about that.
That being said, that part of it is really incredible and awe-inspiring.
Uh-huh.
But for me, Inscryption is probably this season's Hades or Slay the Spire or Downwell.
Oh.
I love playing it. It's really that simple. I don't quite give it a 10, but it is a 9.5 out of 10 for me.
Amazing. Amazing. That's kind of where I was expecting you to go. There are so many things to talk about with this game. Foremost for me is, again, that this game swings. This is a game that swings in so many directions, and it's one of the most surprising and intriguing gaming experiences I've ever had, like indie or not.
Mhm.
Um, The card game at the center of this game is so well designed for short bursts of strategy. Like our friend Drake, I think this is a strategy/puzzle game. That's how I see it. And I love puzzle games. I love reacting to a challenge, seeing something in front of me that I know is trying to kill me, and how do I react to that? That inherently is what a card game is about, and that's what's going on here in the cabin immediately in Act 1 and throughout every act. And it's the kind of depth that's approachable, where it's not overwhelming at the start, it's easy to learn. I wouldn't even say it's, like, hard to master. I think you can kinda just do well. Some of it involves luck, some of it involves strategy, but this game gives you the tools to put together a really good deck through tutorials and just showing you different cards and letting you pick what works for you. There's not, like, one, end all be all best deck. You know, you can kinda,
Mhm.
like, choose cards with a certain synergy, like you said, and make something awesome that might be completely different from what I make, and I love that. Like, I didn't use the bees,
Mhm.
you know? I used wolves in one run that were just doing super well because I had a pack leader and I had a wolf that had, trifurcated strike because I sacrificed a,
Yep.
a mantis lord or whatever it's called. I'm thinking back to
Holiday.
Hollow Knight now. um, and so that wolf is doing tons of damage in like 3 lanes, So there are so many ways you can play with these cards. And I love that Act 1 introduces a baseline for the card game, a formula for the card game
Mhm.
that is then experimented with time and time again through Act 2 and Act 3. And it feels like every time you try something new, it is standing on the shoulders of what you've already done. And so
Ooh.
you have the proper amount of introductory knowledge to take a step forward and try something that's just a little bit new. We're going to do that for a while. And then maybe within the same act, we'll add a few more things. And then in the next act, we're going to add more things. And by the end, if you take the end of the game and the beginning of the game, they probably don't resemble each other that much. You can tell that there's a card game going on.
Mhm.
But there's stuff like mocks going on. There are conduits happening.
Yeah, the conduits was like a hard thing that was like the one that was like, what?
Yeah, there are gems, all this stuff that would be way overwhelming in Act 1 as you're first sitting down with Inscryption. But this game takes its time to get you there. And I think maybe one complaint I have about this game is that maybe it goes on a little bit too long. It's going to require a different amount of time to finish for every player because, again, some of it is skill, some of it's luck. Act 1 took me a lot longer to finish than I expected.
Mhm.
But a side effect of that length is that you do get quality time to learn all this stuff, and I love that. The vibe of this game, the appearance, the mise en scène, as they say in the film world, of the cabin is immersive and brooding, and I'd say that even extends into Act 3 in the facility. Uh, Earlier this year, I played this game called Clickholding. And this game came out 3 years before Clickholding, but I played Clickholding a little earlier than this game. I was reminded of Clickholding. I just wanted to make that note.
Very piercing eyes staring
The
at you.
piercing
Yes,
eyes staring at
that's
you in a
exactly
dark
it.
room,
Yep.
that feeling is just so creepy. And I'm just in awe of the imagination of this game. I found the end to be shocking. My mouth was agape. The
Yes,
end,
I saw it, literally.
yes, the end has something to do with that Luke Carter character. And I'll just say that overall, I bought the Luke Carter character. I knew exactly what, they were going for with that. I totally understand if it's not people's thing, but when it happens the first time, it's like, what is happening? I feel like I'm on a carnival ride that I've never been on before, and I have no idea what's going to happen on the ride. And let's go. I'm strapped in. I'm ready to see what this game's going to show me. I just can never predict what's going to happen. And, at the end of the season, we do our our surprises of the season, right? We
Mhm.
we look back at the 30 games we played. We pick the 5 moments that were the most surprising to us. Come the end of the season, I'm sure I'll have tons of surprises. but you could build all 5 picks from this game, I
Totally.
think.
Yeah.
I also had some dislikes with Inscryption. I think some things are not properly explained, and sometimes you're forced to make a decision where there's frustratingly not enough context and you don't always know like what you're doing. Some examples of this are where you're picking events on the board. This is something that just comes with practice, but sometimes I don't know what those icons mean. There are so many of them. I want to make the right choice. And it just takes me so much trial and error to learn all those icons. There are events that affect the cards or just your overall deck. And sometimes those events are briefly explained and then I forget what was said or I don't understand the brief explanation. There are special cards like Ringworm or Child 13, and you get the sense that there's a grand mystery with these or some effect, something cool maybe that you could do with them. But how would I even find that? There are sigils and card effects that are like obscured, like you can't see the description of them. And so it's like, what does this do? And so this is causing me to have to Google sometimes to learn things. Maybe the game wants me to live in this tiny world of mystery for a bit and just not understand everything fully. But I want to know that I'm making a good decision, especially if I'm far into an act and I'm making a decision about some of the cards in my deck. So I don't like doing that. I don't like putting down the game to do research to figure out something that's a little vague.
Yeah, I guess I would say that oftentimes, especially early on, I did avoid the like Kraken cards that have the obscured effect. I did eventually learn what almost all of them do, but
I still don't know what they do.
I-
That's where I'm at.
I know what all of them except one does because there's
Okay.
like one sigil on there I don't
Yeah.
understand yet.
And so because of that, I'm also avoiding things in this game. If I don't understand something and I don't feel its usefulness, why would I pick it again? And so that's happening here and there. It's not constantly, but it does sort of limit what I'm doing. There can be times where you get to a checkpoint and you have to maybe do a couple fights over and over again, and you have to get back into just the fundamentals of playing the card game Inscryption. And there are times where that can just be a little tedious because you can be playing the card game in this game for a long time. And I think this is part of my comment about the game being maybe just a little bit too long. Maybe this game is like 10 or 15% too long for my taste.
Yeah.
It took me a good, I'd say 15 to 18 hours to get credits.
I might have had it even longer than that.
Yeah, it might have been around 20.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit longer than I expected. And then the ending was shocking. It's an ending I'll remember for a long time. But also there's a lot that leads up to the end. And I think it requires an explainer to understand all of what happens and what the order of events is, at least for me. I have a tough time putting stories like this together. So I can read a Wikipedia article about it. I can appreciate all the pieces put together for me by somebody else, but I'm unable to put it all together myself, I guess. And also, I'm aware of a really interesting epilogue that exists outside of the game, but many players will not see that or read about it. And I think they could have maybe implemented some ideas of that into the game. And I think it maybe would have strengthened the end for me. Overall, Inscryption is an expertly measured experience of 3 key aspects for me. It is a very straightforward yet compelling card game. It has an ambitious metatextual story, and it has a haunting world surrounding it all. Each of its surprises is more shocking and memorable than the last. It plays with its own formula again and again, and I love that because it's stretching the boundaries to the absolute limit. This game is not afraid to just try new things. I also rate this a 9.5 out of 10.
Heckers, baby.
We are aligned on Inscryption when it comes to just score.
It's a very high 9.5 for me. It is very close to a 10 for me.
I thought about a 9, a 9.5, and a 10. That's why I landed on 9.5, is because it's right in the middle. There was a time where I thought, I was early on, and I was like, this is a 9. Later on, I was like, ooh, this is a 9.5. And then I was like, is this a 10? And then I'm like, oh, that's a 9.5.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I wanna jump to your comment about the game feeling too long, and that it.
Sure.
Yes, like objectively, as far as like hours it took, I prefer to not spend that much time on a game. But I really love the card game
Yeah.
so much that
You don't tire of it.
I felt
Yeah.
the hours melting away. And
Mhm.
except for when I had like a really, really good run that ended in failure, like I never wanted to quit. Like whenever I wanted to quit, it was because I was just like really disappointed.
And you finished this game much sooner than I did, date-wise. Like,
Mhm.
you started playing this game on a much earlier date than I did. I did feel a little bit of pressure playing it for the podcast. I wonder if that feeling of it maybe being a little too long would be different outside of that scenario for me. So I just wanna also make that asterisk there.
Yeah, it's an easy one for me because every time I'm trying to play something else for the podcast, all I actually want to do is play Casey's mod or
Mhm.
go back to
Okay.
Inscryption.
Do you wanna talk about Casey's mod? Or do you wanna save that for later?
We can talk about it. I
Since
don't.
you've mentioned it a couple
Yeah.
times.
Well, first I'll explain what Casey's mod
Yeah.
actually is. Basically, it is a mod, big air quotes, for players of the in-universe Inscryption game that really enjoyed Act 1 with Leshy and just want to play that. Like it's just the roguelite experience of Inscryption. No death cards, no bees in your deck instead of squirrels. You're just doing the Leshy run. Sometimes your starter deck can be different, but I'm actually not that far in it because it is pretty challenging for me.
Mm.
Because a lot of what got me through Act 1 in the real game are some of those death cards. Like I would have been lost without those.
Okay.
In Casey's mod, you can add challenges to the game. One of them is, for an example, you remove the clover, which lets you re-roll your cards that you select at the card selection events.
Right.
You can remove the fish hook from the start of the game. You can still find it later, but you just don't have that option. Or you can reduce the size of your backpack so you can only carry 2 items instead of 3. And so the more of those challenges you add, the higher the level you're completing. It's like Hades with the heat runs.
Yeah, it's also like Slay the Spire with I forget what they're called, but
Oh, yeah. I did like next to none of that.
right.
So,
But you can go up to like level, I don't know, 20, you
Yeah.
know.
and I think I just finished level 3 last night,
Okay.
but I'm having a much harder time.
And I've tried, I think, 2 runs of Casey's mod, and I didn't get to the end. I tried one modifier, and then I tried another one. I forget which ones, but huge praise for this game from me is that it keeps going
Mhm.
after the end of the game, and it's easy to revisit parts of the game.
Yeah.
That was actually a huge concern. I should have mentioned that a little earlier, but I love that, dude. It
Yeah.
makes me energized to go back and try things again.
Yeah, when I finished Act 2, I kind of finished it on accident. I was like, "Oh, there was still stuff I wanted to do. I guess I'm done now."
Yeah.
I was like, "God, this game really needs a chapter select." And then we get to the end of the game, and
You do get one.
you
And
have one, and I was very relieved
And
by
you can
that.
even revisit story things.
Yep.
You can revisit Luke Carter moments. It's like, this is so considerate
Yeah.
toward the player. I love that.
Yeah, I was
So-
super worried the whole time I was in Act 3. I'm like, "Well, I'm not even going to try and solve all these puzzles because I have to play the game again anyway." But
Mhm.
that wasn't true.
Similar to how the platinum for Sea of Stars requires just time at a certain point, you
Mhm.
know, like the boss trophy is intimidating on paper, but then it's just a matter of taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the platinum in this game, and that's much easier now knowing that I can go back and do chapter select. It's still going to take me time, but I actually kind of am interested in chasing the platinum now, whereas otherwise, if they hadn't done this at the end, I might
You would have
never
just
try again.
you would have just been like, "Credits was good enough."
Yeah, I might replay the game again someday, but I probably won't try to chase the trophies. But yeah, it's really cool. That's a really cool feature, and it's just a relief when you see it.
Mhm.
So now, going back through all the acts chronologically, what was the process like for Act 1? What worked for you? What were your habits? What got you through? How long did it take? All these things.
Yeah.
Tell me the story of Act 1.
I think my primary focus, I think once I started solving the like slide puzzles
Mhm.
was just trying to solve all the puzzles in the room because that's going to give me access to the most powerful items that I can get at the start of a run, apart from my death cards. So
Yeah.
that was my primary focus. And then when I was like stumped, I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to play the card game for a little while. And then maybe I will have a revelation, or I will pick a card that has like a secret on it. So that was, I kind of went back and forth between that, from getting stumped in the puzzles to getting spanked in the card game and just going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think overall, Act 1 took me, I don't know, a long time. A majority of my time was spent in Act 1.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I played this on stream, except for one session where I just grinded on Act 1 one night for hours. I did so many runs, and then I finally got the right combination of just high power cards, cheap cards, death cards, and you get to so Leshy is playing all these characters, all these bosses
Mhm.
that at the end of each map. And the final like boss of the area is the toughest one, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe, but by that point you've built a really strong deck, so I guess it's arguable. But I got there so many times where I had a deck that was like decent, but it couldn't dispatch his cards quickly. And I just had a run where I had a super just overpowered deck, and that's finally what did it. And so building up to that point, having the stuff that you inherit later, finding out what cards you like the most, that just takes time. I don't know how many runs it was.
I think the most frustrating part about getting through Act 1 was that there is a clock puzzle, and you have to do a certain action in the card game to get the solution to the clock puzzle. And I did that action during my fight with Leshy because I thought that was when I needed to do it.
Is this to get the film?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But you need like another item from Leshy first. And you're supposed to do it earlier in the game. And I just, so I did that on like, I lost like 3 runs where I could have solved the clock puzzle because I just did things in the wrong order.
Right. You need the eye.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I activated what could give me that option at the end of the game. You're not going to get the eye if you're in the final boss.
Right.
So
fair.
Lost a couple of runs worth of time trying to get the eye just because I was doing stuff wrong.
The eye was wild. I think once you find the eye, that sort of fast tracks you to knowing what to do.
Yep. I think I saw you get that on stream. I was like, well, he figured that out way faster than I did.
But I picked the wrong eye a couple times.
Oh, did you?
I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't even like looking that closely, I guess, and I should have. I also want to mention that along with the card game that's iterated upon, the characters and the lore and the world of this game sort of feels comic book-ish to me in that you notice tropes about how this world works, and then those tropes can show up in slightly different ways in Act 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
An example is the characters that show up in the cards. There are versions of those characters that you see in successive acts.
Right.
There are the items you use. You see those items sometimes in later acts. And then there are like, I'm thinking of like the sludge guy, the green sludge man. He's showing up, but in different ways. And so even though you don't understand the story 100%, you'll recognize patterns and you'll go, oh, there's significance to that because I've seen a version of that before.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Kind of like in comic books, how I could read, I'm just picking a random superhero. I could read a certain Flash comic, and then I could read another Flash comic from 50 years later, and I could see like, I could draw points from one to the next.
Mm-hmm.
There are versions of these things going on.
It's like how there's 12 versions of Lex Luthor over the years.
Yes.
Exactly. You get the point. It's like rich billionaire, usually bald,
exactly.
kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love looking for those things, and I feel perceptive when I find that stuff. Act 2, I thought Act 2 was easier than Act 1.
Yep.
I thought it was...
Beat it pretty quick.
What deck did you run with?
I think when I did it the first time, because I did replay Act 2 to trophy cleanup.
Okay.
The first time I did it, I picked the Grimora's deck,
The undead one, the
yeah,
bones one?
what is she called in the Act 2?
Grimora?
Because she's not actually called Grimoire. They're
Oh.
called the Scribe of...
The Scribe of the Dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I picked the starter deck for the Scribe of the Dead.
It's the dead deck.
Yes. And I thought that because like what you said, you notice parallels to the other act,
Yeah.
and like the Scribe of the Dead was the character that I liked the most in Act 1. So I was like,
Okay.
I feel like this is the one I'm supposed to be on their team, so I felt like there was significance in picking that one. I think ultimately, after having played Act 2 a couple of times, the bone mechanic is not necessarily my favorite.
Okay.
It helps with like reducing costs of a lot of other types of cards, so that's helpful. But that's the one I picked. That's the one I had. But ultimately, I think going with what you were familiar with in Act 1, which was the beasts, might have been the better play.
Maybe, yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players do pick the Beast deck because it is just immediately familiar. I ran with the Technology Conduit deck,
Mhm.
which I actually thought was going to be the one you picked just because of your typical
Yeah,
interests, but
I didn't really understand that I was... because the concept of different kinds of cards didn't really exist at that point.
that's true.
Like I thought I was just like picking a team or something.
It was confusing about what the game was telling us to do a little
Yeah.
bit at the start of Act 2. And it does feel like a commitment. I wasn't sure how permanent is this.
Yeah.
And in the end, I don't really know why I picked the technology deck. I think it sounded so much different than Act 1 is the
Mhm.
reason I picked it.
Yeah. I think that is the one that is the most different than
Yeah.
the rest of them.
But then it turns out you can eventually manipulate your deck, swap things out, find new stuff to get really any deck you want. It's just, what are you going to start with?
Hmm.
And then that start point is really going to heavily influence the first area you go to because your first area, you don't have any other choice. So the Technology Conduit deck was fun for me because eventually we can try to make the conduits where we make a chain of robots who power each other up. But in Act 2, we still have 4 lanes.
Yeah.
We don't have 5 lanes yet, like in Act 3. So I found the conduits really hard to use because we
'Cause
have less
that
options.
automatically takes up 2 spots.
Yeah. And so that part was hard. So I started to abandon the idea of creating a circuit. And instead, I just went for the powerful cards in the deck. And there are cards like Curve Hopper, which is basically a really powerful card that doesn't cost as much. It's actually on the curve of like cost versus power. It's more powerful on average than other cards, which is why it's called the Curve Hopper.
Mhm.
And then eventually you can just like litter the playing field with bombs if you want, which causes a lot of chaos. But sometimes, like with the boss that has the conveyor belts going on where the cards are changing sides, sometimes you need to inject a little bit of chaos
Yeah.
and you just hope that luck lands on your side.
I think I liked that. I forgot about that boss, but thinking about it now, that might be my least favorite one.
Yeah,
Um,
that was rough. It's hard to anticipate what will happen.
yeah, for the most part, once I discovered that the option existed, I used the auto fill deck feature in Act 2.
Okay. That
Um,
served you well?
It served me very well, actually.
Okay.
It's a very intelligent feature somehow.
I did not trust it 1 ounce. I think I used it once and I was like, but what if I used my human mind to come up with it? That might be more satisfying.
Yeah, I
I just
didn't
didn't
want to.
trust that it would give me something I'd like.
I didn't want to spend the time because I still didn't totally understand the mocks or love it
Oh.
that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I just sort of let it autofill. Eventually, I did start dropping in stuff that I was like, I really want to play with this card more. And so I would swap a couple things
Okay.
out. But in general, like, it put a lot of bones in so that I could get some easy bodies on the board to sacrifice for beasts. And those would hold me over until my technology meter was high enough to play strong technology. And I did very little with the mocks.
I bet the auto select looks at cost. And I bet it
Mhm.
just tries to find the right balance because in a game like this, you want a mixture of high, medium, and low cost cards, obviously, but you want most of your cards to live in the middle.
Yeah.
You don't want everything to be super expensive. You don't want everything to be super cheap because then you wouldn't have enough power to defeat things. So you want the curve to crest in the middle so that like you're playing the 3 and 4 cost, or I'm thinking technology.
Yeah,
So I'm
but
using that terminology with you, but with the technology
2
deck.
blood, 2 bone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. In the technology deck, you can play things that cost 1 to 6 power. So most of my cards were in that 3 or 4 power range with
Yep.
a few 6s here and there. So when it came to finding solutions for things or like doing the puzzle solving, I guess with any act in this game, did you try to brute force anything? Did you ever just like sit there spinning wheels until you found the right thing? And did that happen?
Yes,
Okay.
and yes.
Wow. Okay.
So I mentioned the clock. It took me a long time to find the clock solution proper. And so I was just like brute forcing the clock, doing every single second hand combination, which sucked. So I brute forced that. I am sure I brute forced a couple in the factory, but I don't remember for sure. But in general, I tried to like solve all the ones that were pretty obvious. And then I think there were 2 in the factory that I had to Google because there's like
yeah, because there are too many combinations at a certain point.
There's like a build a card puzzle. I did not understand at all what it was telling me. And once I got to the build a card section, I still didn't understand how that system worked correctly.
See, I didn't even know that was a puzzle. I thought that
Mm.
was just a representation of what I would later do. I didn't know there was a puzzle attached to it, I guess.
Yeah.
When it came to Act 2, do you remember the wizard tower? How you have to find the 3 symbols to put into the pillars
Yes.
that unlock all the fights? One of those I just brute forced.
I think
I guessed.
I think I might have brute forced 2 of them.
Yeah, I just like guessed stuff and I found it within like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so that felt pretty amazing. All right. Act 3 now. I think Act 3 is where we get some of the surprises that hit the hardest. I think what I will remember for a long time is the Golly fight. The Golly fight, you know what this one is?
Yeah.
The Golly fight is where, now again, this is going to be a spoiler, but depending on what platform you're playing on, you might be playing on a console, you might be playing on PC through like Steam. This fight is going to look at your friends list on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Or it's going to look at your Steam friends list and it's going to take the iconography and namesake of your friends and turn them into cards that are played against you.
Yeah.
You were watching me stream this part and something really coincidental happened with which friends were picked.
I mean, for me, it was like I only have, I don't know, like 14. So I knew what to, I was going to see eventually everybody I knew. But
Did you see me?
I believe so.
Really?
I don't
Did
recall.
you kill me?
I don't recall. I think you might have been one of the later ones that
Okay.
ended up being too strong for me to overcome.
Okay. Yeah, I'm that good. You were also really strong. So you showed up for me, as did your wife's old profile.
Yep.
And your brother's.
Yep.
And Grant's. Did Grant show up? No,
Yeah.
I think so. Maybe Grant showed up.
Our friend
Oh,
Arma
yes.
Narma showed up.
Yes, I forgot about Arma Narma showed up.
Yep.
Like basically a whole circle of people we know / are related to.
Yeah.
Showed up on my board. And I'm like, what is even freaking happening right now?
Yeah.
And I didn't notice it was happening at first because through PSN Profiles, which is a site you and I use to look up trophies, I had previously done boosting sessions with complete randos on this site where someone helps you attain the trophy faster. And in return, you help them maybe.
Yeah.
I've previously done that several times and I've got a lot of randos in my friends list. And when this section started, those randos were the ones that were drawn. So I didn't recognize their names. And they were like random strings of letters and numbers sometimes. So I'm like, that's weird. That just must be some technology stuff. And I didn't even look at their profile picture. And then Disco, Arma Narma gets drawn.
Arma Narma,
Like,
yep.
What? And then your brothers get drawn. And then you get drawn. And then my mission, my sort of like extra task became don't kill DiscoCola, but also win. So that was fun. That was a fun little moment. What other surprises hit, if any, for you?
From Act 3 specifically?
Yeah, or if this is reminding you of another surprise we haven't touched on.
I'm going to say the actual like ending after we've defeated the final antagonist. We get this moment where we're actually still playing, and we get to experience 2 more worlds that weren't initially part of the game.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see like sort of like a what if, if we would have been playing with this other character. So it was cool to see what they would have been like, because I was curious, like, oh, well, these two didn't get a chance to shine really, but here's what it would have been like if they did.
Right.
And I got to say, I'm really glad, as cool as the arm attachment is, objectively speaking, I'm really glad that we didn't play
Have to do that for long.
Play Magnificus's game for more than a couple minutes.
Playing Magnificus's world for a moment had major the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe and Finding Rocket League energy.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, we're doing this now? Huh? But that was happening just like at a near constant clip at the end, where we're just doing different stuff. That was actually one of my favorite moments, was getting a glimpse into those characters, because they're who I find really interesting in this game. I want to see more about their worlds, what's going on with them. And so even just the way their text shows up has so much character to it.
Yeah. And how different each world looks visually.
And there's a moment where 3 of them are talking to each other and like conspiring to do something. And I want more moments like that.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I could have taken more. I planted a seed in here like more than a week ago. That Transformer over there, his name is Magnificus.
Oh.
That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What? This one over here?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. So
Is it a Decepticon?
It is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you want it or what?
No, I just planted it in here because I wanted this anecdote in the episode.
It's like I'm playing Inscryption and I'm doing the escape room. I need to stand up from the computer and like walk around this room and solve puzzles. You've hidden tons of stuff in here.
I have hidden tons of stuff in here.
Oh my gosh,
no,
I have to
that was it. There's no other Transformers with parallel names.
Okay. Well, I'm going to poke out my eye and see what happens.
Incidentally, he is a microscope, eye related. So, yeah. Anyways, that's all. The end.
Well, you've kind of moved us into the finale, which I like, because I want to tell you that I'm confused by some things. Like, I don't know what old data means, and this is where we kind of get into the next layer. This game has so many layers when it comes to gameplay, but also story. This is where we can talk a little bit more about Luke Carter, but also about the ARG attached to this game, which you sent me videos about and I watched. And
you watched them.
I watched all 3
I'm so glad.
yesterday. And that's what I'm talking about when I say some of that stuff is super compelling. And I think some of that stuff being outside of the main game is a tragedy. I think some of that could have been worked into the game. Would it have lengthened the story in the game, which I already think maybe is a little too long? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But would it have wrapped up the story in interesting ways for me? Yes, totally. So I don't know. What do you want to say about Daniel Mullins and what he's done here?
To the lengths he's gone to is a little bit extreme, I would say. But all the same, now that someone else has done all of the legwork on it, it's incredible. It's awe-inspiring. Like,
it is wild.
How
Those
deep it
banana
goes.
Sandwiches, dude.
Like, how long has this been the plan?
I know.
Because there's elements that go back to Pony Island or whatever, and I don't know when that came out.
From 27, hold on, Pony Island, 2016. And games before that, too.
It's nuts.
Little experiments and things that didn't even work out as games. And it's
so how long has some of this been planned?
I know.
Yeah.
Years. I mean, this is a long game when it comes to building a world and telling a story. Daniel Mullins is a certified madman.
Yeah.
A certified freak for doing all this.
It's crazy.
And like, part of what we're saying here is that there is an outside the game, real world task of, do you want to say
puzzle after puzzle after puzzle?
Yes.
To like ultimately decipher what the old data actually is.
Right.
And I personally feel like I get enough on the surface of what old data is to just like, oh, it's forbidden knowledge for a reason because of real world stuff.
So we don't need to know about it within the context
I don't
of
need to
this?
know. I
Okay.
understand that it's like dark government secrets just from
fair.
that like brief glimpse that we get at the end of the game.
That's fair. It's just sometimes that feels a little too convenient for me, I guess. Like just let's throw away the explanation because of how special it is, you know? So I'm naturally curious about it.
Yeah,
And so,
I get it.
Yeah.
But I will say that I did notice playing the game like 4 or 5 clues that ultimately help you solve this puzzle. And I wrote like 3 or 4 of them down. I was like, that's going to be important later for a puzzle.
Mm.
And ultimately, it never resulted in anything because it's part of this grander puzzle that I never could have
Right.
hoped to have been smart enough to solve.
Yeah, you feel involved in a way, but not in the way you originally anticipated. Shoot, if you had been able to stumble across some of that stuff, that would have been like if there was a more accessible way to explore that,
Mhm.
I guess, I would want to maybe do that with you.
Yeah,
that'd be hard.
It goes back to what you were talking about with Grunn, just like trying to solve things
Yes.
with Emily. Like, I think that's the fun of this and why I'm overall positive on its existence, because it is this just like extra game that you can participate in if you want to. But if you're playing a game for a podcast and you need to roll credits, you don't need to worry about it.
Exactly. It's all valid,
Yes.
I think is what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
and I agree. And I also really adore it for what it is, for the idea of it. I definitely appreciate it. There's no possible way for me to partake, especially now that I can just read about it
Mhm.
online so easily. And I have done that, and I've watched videos about it. But I'll probably never forget that effort and that just the act of doing that by a developer for a creative project is just unprecedented, and I've never seen anything like it.
I mean, so Five Nights at Freddy's exists, and there's a lot of that kind of crap in there. And there's even a lot of that in Doki Doki Literature Club, not to this extent,
Yeah.
but there are still like
Sure.
kind of grander questions that are maybe yet to be solved with Doki Doki
That's
Literature
true.
Club.
I mean, I remember that game made us do things in the real world that aren't to the extent of doing this, but we're going to social media
Yeah.
to like look at stuff, and we're like, holy crap, this has been here the whole time I've been playing.
Yeah, and there's still like a parallel universe that you can find in the like files, like conversations and stuff
Yes.
that's still sort of unresolved, that maybe hinted at an upcoming game that still hasn't manifested as far as I know. So it's stuff like that has been done before, but I think I've never seen it quite to this level with this much deliberate intention, because I think some of the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff that I've read and consumed is sort of like incidental, convoluted, and full of retcons, kind of a, ARG
Okay.
kind of idea.
Sure.
But this all feels very deliberate and planned and very disciplined.
Yes. Like very measured, very considered at every step. And I have the suspicion now that every time Daniel Mullins releases a game, that game is going to contain clues maybe to things outside of that game. And the second most recent game, in this case, Inscryption, when Pony Island 2 comes out, I'm going to suspect that Inscryption has clues that tie into Pony Island 2.
Ooh.
And that maybe Pony Island 2 will have things that retroactively call back to his whole gameography.
Yeah.
Going to suspect that. Like, I have to now.
Yeah.
It makes me so curious. But yeah, I want to play Pony Island 2 now. I think you should play Pony Island.
Is that one on our list?
It's not on our list.
It's not. Okay.
I've had it on my secret game list, but if you want to ever play it, I would not be offended because I've played it already. And so I would love for you to just have the excuse to play it for the podcast if you want. Yeah,
I know
very
next to
interesting.
nothing about it.
I
So
think you would have a good time.
okay.
It's very Doki Doki Literature Club in this game in ways, but also its own thing.
Cool.
I think you would appreciate it. But anything else you want to say about this massive game and just all the layers going on?
Yeah, I think we have to. We should probably cut it there. We've been at it for a little while now. So, just overall, great experience. Loved Inscryption. I'm gonna keep playing it, and I look forward to just playing through regular acts 1, 2, and 3 again.
Yeah, I want to revisit it too. probably through Casey's mod and also just going back to clean up trophies maybe. I will think about it for a long time. I'm glad neither of us got spoiled on it. And I'm happy that we get to talk about it with friends now,
Yeah.
like with Drake and others. I ran into Drake recently. He's like, "Oh man, I listened to your season 6 finale episode. I'm so excited for you guys to review Inscryption. I can't wait." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, dude, stop talking."
Grant
did-
was texting me. Grant of Coffee Fame Grant
Yeah.
texted me a lot. He was like, "Tell me when you start Inscryption. Tell me when you do it."
Oh.
And I did it. And then I ultimately like passed the point where he was. So I'm further than him now. But
That's amazing. He'll be like a foremost expert on all the story and lore by the time he eventually finishes it, I
Yeah.
think, because he's that way. But anyway, that was a super interesting experience, and that is our review of Inscryption. You can play it on PC, Mac, Linux, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. We both rated it a 9.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Oni Mochi. Underplayed is on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at UnderplayedPod. I'm also in those places at BoPo, that's BO_PO.
and I am at DiscoCola in all of those places to varying degrees, including Backlogged, where both of today's games are on my top 100 indie games list, with Astronite at 76
Ooh,
and Inscryption at 13.
that's around the spot Inscryption will be for me in my top 100 list as well, I think. Next time, we'll have 2 more secret games to review. A developer interview with Noah Lone, aka Some Humble Onion, and our featured game will be Katana Zero, an action game developed by ASCIIsoft, which Some Humble Onion picked for us to review and discuss with him. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.